Thank you very much. So, we're now live, members. Those of you who are taking part online, kindly mute for the time being. Thank you very much, and I'll invite you to speak as we go through the meeting. Thank you for joining us. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Bradnam, and I'm the chair of this committee. I'd like to welcome you to the Joint Development Control Committee meeting taking place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 15th of November 2023, and we're in South Cams Hall. So, firstly, could I ask you to introduce yourselves? And I'm going to go around the table firstly. So, starting with Councillor Martin Khan.
Martin Khan, Councillor for Histon and Impington.
Thank you. Councillor Thornborough.
Councillor Katie Thornborough, City Councillor for Petersfield.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Richard Stobart, one of the members for Girton Ward. This includes the villages of Madingley and Drayton.
Thank you. Councillor Garvey.
I'm Corinne Garvey from South Cams, and I work with Richard. We cover the villages of Girton, Drayton, Madingley and part Eddington.
And I believe you're substituting for Councillor Hawkins today. Thank you.
Substituting for Toomey, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Levine.
Councillor David Levine, City Councillor for Trumpington Ward, and I'm here on behalf of Councillor Flaubert.
Thank you very much. Councillor Porrer.
Morning, I'm Councillor Katie Porrer from Market Ward in the City. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fane.
Morning, Peter Fane, Councillor for Shelford Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Martin Smart, I'm one of the councillors in King's Sedlers in Cambridge.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith. Andy, can you look at Councillor Smith's microphone, please? It doesn't seem to want to come on.
The technology is ahead of me, Chairman. I'm Councillor Simon Smith. I'm Councillor for Castle Ward in the City.
Thank you very much. Just temporarily, just to let the lovely people online know that we have a wonderful big view of your faces on our wall at the moment. Would you mind turning off your cameras until we ask you to speak? Thank you very much. Just going through the, so we're quorate in terms of members, and I'll proceed to agenda item 1 because I'll introduce the officers shortly. So we've received apologies, as we said, from Councillor Toomey Hawkins, who's being substituted by Councillor Garvey, and Councillor Levine is substituting for Councillor Flaubert. So thank you very much. We also have apologies from Councillor Bajent. So the officers permanently at the table for this meeting are Philippa Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Philippa Kelly, the Strategic Sites Manager for the Shared Planning Service.
Thank you. And our legal advisor, Keith Barber.
Good morning. I'm Keith Barber. I'm the legal advisor.
Thank you. And Sarah?
I'm Sarah Steed. I'm the committee manager for the meeting.
Thank you. And today we have Claire Tunnicliffe. Okay, Claire Tunnicliffe is producing for us. We also have 2 planning officers with us. Very good to see you here, and we'll introduce you when we come to those applications. Thank you, and those details. So for anybody who is watching this meeting, copies of the agenda can be found on the City Council's website under Committee Meetings, Minutes and Agendas. So members, please would you try to refer to the page and paragraph numbers within the agenda if you're referring to a specific part of the agenda. Members will have taken part in meetings long enough to know that items on your desk might appear on the video link if you show them, so just be aware of that. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For those participating in the meeting via Teams, be reminded that the meeting chat is neither confidential nor private and can be subject to an FOI or GDPR request. So please don't use that, but please can participants keep their microphone and cameras turned off until we come to the application. If you wish to speak, please raise your request in the chat. So the process for the consideration of the planning application will be, actually I might come back to that when we come to the planning application, because the first item is the pre-application, so I'm going to come back to that part. So moving to agenda item 2, please would councillors advise if they have any declarations of interest with items on this agenda. Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the application number 5, I'm a member of CPPF, but I am not influenced by that in considering the application.
Thank you very much. Okay. Dobot.
I think it's become customary to mention, being a mention of Cambridge cycling campaigns, so I feel duty bound. So I'm a member of Cambridge
In the
cycling
absence
campaign.
of Councillor Bajent, it's very good to hear someone making this declaration. Thank you very much. So agenda item 3, I couldn't see any others, no. Okay, so agenda item 3, minutes of the meetings on the 16th of August and 20th of September have been submitted to this meeting for approval. So are you happy, members, that I sign those minutes as a true record? Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to sign the first page here, and then I'll come and do the rest afterwards. And the 20th of August, 20th of September, is everybody happy with that? Those minutes are a true record. Councillor
Just
Khan?
regarding the August minutes, I wasn't at the meeting, so I'll be abstaining.
Okay, I'm sure we can make a note of that. And yes, in fact, I wasn't present for the meeting on the 20th, but we still record them. Councillor
Likewise,
Stobart.
Chair, I wasn't present for the 20th, so 20th of September, so I should abstain.
So it's sort of by affirmation anyway. So, members, are you happy with the minutes of the 20th of September? Yes? Okay. Thank you. So, we then come to agenda item 4, which is the pre-application developer briefing for the 4V site, Robinson Way in Cambridge, which is the redevelopment of the West 4V building, and the applicant is the University of Cambridge. So, would the 4 main speakers like to come forward to the public speaking table, and I will ask you to introduce yourselves. Right, now I have an instruction here that says, thank you Sarah, at the beginning of each item please verbally run through the speakers list to ensure that everyone's present and that no one's been missed off. Now I have quite a long list of members, so it might be easier if I went through my list, if you wouldn't mind saying who you are. So this, I have Rosie Garvey. Is she here?
She's not here. She's
no. Okay.
Online, I believe.
Oh, she's online, is she?
She might be.
Might be online. Okay. Eric Martin, that's yourself, isn't it? Thank you. I think you're leading on this, I believe.
I believe I am, yes.
Good. Okay. Hurrah. Nick Green.
Yes.
Thank you. Iona Campbell.
Hi, yes.
Thank you. And Neil Ricketts.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much. Rebecca Sant.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Jamie Ward.
Hello, I'm online.
Might be online.
Yeah.
Okay. And Roberta Ramachi, possibly also online?
Yes, I'm online. Hello,
Lovely.
good morning.
Thank you. And Lizzie Marchant, also possibly online.
I'm also online. Good morning.
Good morning. And Anna Holding.
Morning, yes, I'm online.
Thank you so much. Emily Chatwin.
Hi, yes, I'm online.
Right, we heard you very distantly. Thank you. Stephanie Tyson.
Morning from online.
Splendid, thank you. And Stuart Gray.
Good morning, I'm online as well.
Great, lovely. Thank you very much. So I'm sure if we need you, I'm sure your colleagues will ask for you to speak. So great. Excuse me. Exactly. Okay. So thank you very much. So please do present your application or your pre-application to us, and then I'm sure members will ask you questions about the application, which hopefully will inform any final version that you come to. So thank you. So Eric, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand over to Rebecca, who's going to do a brief introduction about the planning strategy.
Good morning, councillors. So we are looking at a pre-app, which is the redevelopment of the West Forvey building, and we are looking at bringing that forward as a full application in March next year, and that will be submitted alongside an indicative master plan for the wider site. And then it's envisaged that then that would follow as an outline application for the rest of the site. The reason that it's being done is this way is due to the potential regulatory failure of the current Mickle facility, which is housed in the West Forvey building. So that's why we're looking at bringing forward the full application, but we've been working hard on the master plan so you can see how it indicatively would sit within the site. So all of our pre-app meetings have been with the master plan as the initial focus, and then looking in more detail at building B1, and that's what we're going to go through today for you as well.
Sorry, I just didn't quite hear you said the failure of something, and I didn't quite hear
failure of Mickle. So it's the people that are housed within the West Forvey building at present. So the building is falling into disrepair. It's one of the oldest buildings on the site, so it needs to be replaced, and that's why we're looking at doing that and pushing forward with that replacement.
That's helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
So Chair, I just want to say that there's going to be a few acronyms in this presentation, and Mickle is one of them. Nick, do you want to explain what Mickle is?
So Mickle is a university department. It's the molecular imaging chemistry laboratory. So essentially they do radiochemistry. They develop new tracers for use in various scanning equipment. It's a unique department within the university, but it's also relatively unique in the country and the world. They do some very kind of unique kind of work. We'll cover it in more detail later on.
Thank you.
So we are going to go through first the master plan in order to provide context to then the Mickle project. So I'm going to go through the master plan, then I'm going to hand over to Neil, who's going to be talking about the technical aspects of the master plan, and then Saunders Boston are going to talk about the Mickle building itself.
I hope somewhere early in your presentation there's some words that say what Mickle stands for. Is there? If not, I know you just explained it, but it's quite hard to hear that speed.
Sorry, I say it's molecular imaging chemistry laboratory. It's radiochemistry, effectively. MICL. Yes, sorry,
right,
that's the bit. Yes,
okay,
of course.
MICL.
Yes, we turned it into a word, whereas actually it's an acronym. Yes.
Thank you.
So I think the screen is working, so I'm going to go through a few things. First of all, providing a bit of context to where the Forvey site is. The Forvey is located within the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, as some of you may know, and the CBC has recently been proposed as an area of major change as part of the local plan first proposals, and what you're seeing here in the map is in orange the sites that have been allocated already, and in the blue line are the sites that are being considered for allocation, particularly expansion of the biomedical campus to the south. not part of this briefing, but important to mention that we also, as master planners, are working on the emerging CVC framework, being informed with officers, and which is being backed by evidence-based scenarios that hopefully is going to go to members at some point in the new year. What we've been looking at is how the structure of the place is going to work, street hierarchy, open spaces, biodiversity, net gain, blue and green infrastructure, and essentially how this becomes a new neighborhood of the city, including green belt enhancements. The important part of this master plan that we've been looking at, or the framework that we've been looking at, is creating a series of open public spaces that are located within 5-minute walk from each other, and this is the structure of the place. These are areas where amenities is going to be located, where blue and green infrastructure is consolidated with amenity spaces and transport hubs, etc. And one of these places is within the 4V sites, and we've been calling it the 4V garden, and we're going to discuss in more detail as we go through the presentation what this means. This is the site itself. This is 4V sites. It's a site that sits in a transition between different scales and different characters of the place, from residential to the south and the east to more large buildings that are part of the hospital, Addenbrooke's Hospital, to the north and the northwest. We can see on the left-hand side the Children's Hospital site, which has been consented, and it's going to start on site imminently. There's 4 existing buildings on the site. The existing Mickle building is on the lower left-hand side, there where my cursor is. And there's other 3 buildings on the site at the moment with different degrees of occupation from university users. They range from the 60s or the late 70s to the early 2000s in different degrees of need of replacement. It is a very car-focused area, so there's the access to the site is from the north. There's about 180 spaces in the site at the moment, and the idea is to transform this gradually into a place that is more people-focused. As you can see, one of the main characteristics of the site is the existence of mature trees, mainly around the border, and that's something that we're taking into consideration. From the university's point of view, the idea is to create a new world-class research center focused on neurosciences and mental health. So it's a great opportunity for the university to collocate academic users with like-minded, compatible commercial R&D users. So it's going to be a very rich ecosystem of both companies and academic users here on the site. As I mentioned before, trees are very important on the site, so we've been surveying, understanding, and cataloging these trees to understand their value, not only individually, but as a group. And this has informed, from the start, the proposal. So we've created a landscape-led approach to the master plan, where we celebrate special characteristics of these groups of trees or individual trees in order to create a concept and an approach to the landscape. These are some images of the existing site. If you haven't been, it's a really special area and almost like a green island in the CVC. And what we're trying to create here are areas that are more open, accessible, permeable, and that start to sort of break the barriers of the site physically and also from a perception point of view. One of the key areas is what we call the 4V garden, which sits at the northwest of the site, and this is where the new station opens, where people are going to come from. So it's a very important place in the site, and this is how it could be. This is an illustrative image showing the transformation of that site. At the moment, it is a car park. So the idea is to introduce pedestrian access, cycle access, and work with new planting and retain most of the existing trees on site with the buildings in the background. And this idea that then the buildings are going to be then replacing the old buildings, and this is going to happen gradually over a period of time, with the Mickle 2 building happening as a first phase, with being nestled among trees and with paths leading to the different blocks. The idea is that this is a scenario where the master plan is complete, so it's 3 blocks, Mickle 2 is in the middle, so it's the B1 block that you see right in the middle, and there's another 2 blocks, one in the west and one in the east. The idea, this is the roof plan and this is the ground floor plan. These are indicative layouts. We've done a lot of work in order to establish constraints, to root protection areas, etc., where the blocks and the areas of development could be. So this is, there's a lot of information on the back of this. This is just illustrative drawings, but you can see that the idea is that the north is very permeable with new pathways for people and cycling, and the south and the southeast remains much more green, forming a green edge. We're starting to establish an architectural language for what the blocks could be as a design code along 5 principles, from animation of the ground floor to legible entrances, facade hierarchy that responds to different orientation and location of blocks, etc. Shared amenity spaces both on ground floor and in different places in the building, and very importantly, a roof form that is not that is sculpted and shaped. So this is an indicative section of what one of the blocks could look like, divided into 3 strata, or three stratification. One, this base, which is where people are going to arrive, is more permeable. A middle part, which is within, amongst the trees, and then a top. The replacement buildings are going to be slightly larger than existing ones, about 4 to 6 stories. And the idea is that what is above the tree canopy then has setbacks and gets sculpted in a way that it's interesting to form this idea almost that there's a science village here. So anything that skylines above the tree line then becomes an interesting skyline to avoid flat roofs and blocks, which are prevalent at the moment in CVC, and we're trying to change that. And this is an early concept sketch that describes how that could be achieved by stepping the top and working with plant on the top. There's a lot of kit on these buildings because they're science-based, so it's the idea of celebrating science as well. So the idea of they're working rather than against things like going the roof, but with the roof. And this is a view from the north, and how that could be then nestled in amongst the trees, and most importantly, achieving a transition in scale from the large buildings in the hospital to the smaller buildings on the south. There's going to be a phased strategy. So these are photos of a model that we did, a physical model that shows how the phasing could work, starting at the top right-hand side with the Mickle 2 building, and then gradually and carefully replacing buildings along a period of time as and when needed. And this is just photos showing a model. I'm going to hand over to Neil, who's going to be talking about the technical aspects of the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So I'm going to talk quickly about the engineering and technical aspects. So Rambo, I'm presenting here. We're covering the discipline shown on screen. So
could you just bring your microphone a little bit closer? And
is that better?
Please take your time.
Yeah, okay.
Don't rush.
So I'm aware I've got a lot to get through here in quite a short period of time. So I'm covering lots of disciplines here and lots of detail over sort of the last 12 months that we're going to talk through. So this is a master plan that we're quite high level here in our thinking, in our strategic design and planning of the site. So one of the most important aspects of the site is to consider the site-wide services and consider how we're going to feed these new buildings, which obviously will increase the demand on the utilities. So what you're seeing on screen is an indicative early scheme for bringing in utilities reinforcement with a new high voltage ring coming in to provide power, new comms, and also renewing and extending the incoming water. I'll talk more about civil engineering in a minute, but that's obviously a crucial part of the site-wide service, and it's one of the most space-hungry elements of the site-wide services, which is why it's shown here, but I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. We are looking across disciplines, so the 4V site is a relatively constrained site because we're trying to do the right thing around the trees and the greenery and protect the tree protection zones and the route zones. So we have to think quite early on about how all of these services stack up and how they integrate and coordinate with each other. So you can see here the various colours of shading. As I say, I'll talk about the civil scheme in a minute, but this is just to give you an idea of the sort of the level of thinking that we're at. And there's a lot of thought and a lot of time's gone into the coordination, the reinforcement and the phasing of the utilities to serve these buildings as they come online. Sorry.
I'm not interrupting you. Sorry, I am interrupting you, but I just want to say that there's going to be a fire alarm in a few minutes' time. It is a test. Okay. It is not an actual one. So we'll pause when that happens and then do carry on. Okay, just to warn you.
Okay. Thank you. So sustainability, there's a lot of detail behind what we've done so far on sustainability, but on the screen are the KPIs, the key performance indicators for the sustainability strategy. So we've set early on, and we're quite early on in our design process, but we've set the operational energy targets for offices and laboratories and renewable energy. So we will comply with obviously the local plan, 10% renewable generation. We're setting challenging but hopefully achievable embodied carbon targets and considering quite carefully the types of structure and the type of buildings that we put in place, and as we move through the design stage we'll be doing more on that. I don't need to tell you water is an important issue around Cambridge. I'm sure you're all aware of that, and that's something that we are very conscious of and are setting off with no illusions for how challenging actually that's going to be to achieve. So we'll talk about BREEAM in a minute, but we know that we've got to target all of the credits under the water category for BREEAM, which is quite challenging. So to talk about BREEAM, currently targeted score 77.45%, so BREEAM rating of excellent, with a potential to achieve 88, and we'll obviously target all of the water credits in there. This is an early BREEAM assessment. Obviously, this is on master plan level, not a building by building level. So, as the design of the scheme progresses, the BREEAM assessors will become more targeted on a building by building basis. But for now, it's about setting the design parameters and understanding what the outputs are and what the targets we're trying to hit. So, I promised you a civil engineering section. The site runoff and the surface water treatment of the site is probably one of the most technically challenging aspects that we're dealing with. We've got very, very low runoff of 2 litres per second per hectare, and in order to achieve that, we have to put lots of attenuation on the site. So we have a combination of blue roofs on the buildings, so another technical term, I suppose, but a blue roof is essentially a zone on a roof that can hold on to water and release it more slowly into the drainage system, rather than the traditional way of doing things where it just all pours down the drain and off it goes. So, the strategy is all about capturing the water and slowing it up as much as possible so that we don't overwhelm the local network. We've got a very low total discharge of 5 litres per second there for the whole site. So there's a combination of blue roofs, attenuation tanks and holding crates in the ground, which are the hatched areas, and they will be on a building by building basis as the buildings are built out, but also on the master plan there will be volume attached to each building. We've also got porous paving, permeable surfaces, which will also help to retain, and obviously the 4V garden. So to talk quickly about mechanical services, there's quite a lot of detail in here, which is kind of for your information as a pack, really. So I won't necessarily read every single thing that's on every slide, but you can also always refer back to it. So this is a master plan. We're not actually designing the buildings themselves yet, in all of the detail inside, but what we do need to do is we need to be able to size the primary plant and understand how the plant will fit within the planning envelope, essentially. So within the building envelope that Eric's team have drawn, and coordinating with them with these nice chamfered roofs that lessen the visual impact of the buildings and make it look attractive. So in order to do that, we do some preliminary calculations based on a number of assumptions for now. So these are going to be, as Eric describes, laboratory buildings. So laboratory buildings have quite a high plant requirement. So the plant on laboratory buildings is an important aspect of the design, and they need to be considered early on. So the site will be an all-electric fossil fuel site. So we'll be removing natural gas for heating and replacing it with electrically powered air source heat pumps.
Good to know it works. And just to remind you, in total, you have about 20 minutes. So
I'm going to speed up a little bit. So this is just to give you a flavour of the kind of design stage that we're at, which is essentially planning blocks of plant to enable Eric and his team to define the shape and the size of the building. We've also considered, some of you may be interested to know, we've considered a centralised energy strategy for the park. Shown on screen is an early diagrammatic plan of what that plant would look like if we were to centrally house all the plant and link the buildings up with a pipe network. Presently, that's been deemed not really practical, given the size and the constraints on the site with the number of trees, but it was a good exercise to work through and assess the pros and cons. So electrical, I talked about all electric buildings, so we obviously require quite a lot more power in order to power this all electric fossil fuel site, so we will be applying for additional power, approximately 7 MVA, and there will be electric vehicle charging on site and with 112 spaces with a mixture of active and passive. And what I've got on screen here now really is just showing you the phased development of the electrical infrastructure. So I'll just been through. Exterior lighting, we've done a very early exterior lighting design, but rest assured it'll be designed in accordance with all the current regulations and guidance to not bleed light out of our site unnecessarily, so maintaining that darkness so that we don't annoy any neighbours, but enough lighting on the centre of the site there to make sure that people are safe and that we've got the correct levels of lighting there for everybody wandering around. Fire suppression, so our initial studies have shown that we will need to extend the fire hydrant system into the site to make sure that we're close enough with the hydrant to meet the minimum distances, and currently proposing dry riser systems per buildings, but not at this stage sprinklered. So acoustics is an important part of this site. We are constrained by neighbours. We do have residential neighbours on our boundary. So we've done some quite detailed modelling and shown on screen. You probably can't read all of the images, but I'll let you look back at your pack later on. We've effectively modelled all of the noise levels and the effect on neighbours, and I've got some better graphics on that coming up. So green on the boundary there shows that we meet the City Council planning noise limits, and we can do that in day and night with the plant running. And then we've also assessed it for BREEAM, and the red receptors mean that we are missing the target slightly, and green means we're meeting. So we have a little bit of work to do on the BREEAM Pollution 05, which is a tougher criteria to hit than the council limit. But we think, because we're at such an early stage of design, there's lots of design development and detail to come out, and we think we can optimise it and achieve the noise levels. Very quickly, building physics. So for those of you who don't know, building physics is about the optimisation, and it's about the minimising operational energy required to run a building. We've done some good detail on this at this design stage, and daylight studies, we've used parametric modelling, we've looked at massing, orientation, we've looked at shading, we've looked at daylight across the floors, and we've also checked against the Part L building regulations. So just a few images here of some of our optimisation models. So looking at the shape and the orientations of the buildings, taking some typical spaces, and using these to inform Eric's team on the percentage of glazed ratio that they can have in the building and the specification of the glass. We're always treading that balance between natural daylight and reducing lighting energy in the day versus excessive solar gain in the summer and having to cool the space down. So we're always treading that tightrope and calculating the balance point, essentially. So nice graphics on screen of just showing how we've achieved to our design specification. So you can see the glazing ratios on the screen for different orientations of bays.
Can I just ask how many other speakers are planning to speak? Just one?
One.
Okay, thank you. Just be mindful of the time.
Yeah, shall I wrap up? Image on screen of our daylight modelling. Getting pretty close to the end now, so this is the Part L compliance model. Again, it's in the pack if you want to look at more detail. It just sets the performance fabric of the scheme. One last slide on transport. So in terms of transport, the plan for transport is to make sure that the site is accessible for all users and to make sure that more vulnerable users have good access and are prioritised. So on the screen are the metrics that we've used. So in essence, there's going to be a reduction in parking and an optimisation of the walking and cycling routes with lots of nice secure cycle stores attached to the buildings. And I think we'll end it there. That's okay.
Very much. And just members, so you know, the pack that is being referred to was emailed to us yesterday by Sarah Steed, but it's a very large document, so it may have disappeared into your spam folder or not got there. But do carry on. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Hi. So that's the master plan we just heard about, which kind of sets the context. We are the architects, so Saunders Boston, for the B1/Mickle building. Appreciate there's not a huge amount of time, so we'll kind of run through it quite quickly, but try and give you the kind of key points about the kind of proposal for the building that we're at. I think we've seen the context. So the B1 building occupies the bottom bit there. One of the complications we have is that the Mickle department are currently within the orange building, which is called the 4V building. So there's a sequencing problem with the building. So this drawing here just shows how we can consolidate them in, how we can use them. Their department have to keep working, so they can't stop because their research, it doesn't work if it stops. And this building will take a couple of years to build, probably. These drawings here just show their location within the building. They are a relatively small department. They are a really critical department at the university. They do some, as I said earlier, they do some very unique work. They are growing and their type of work is changing, which is part of the need for this project. The other part of the need is the fact that their existing building is in a relatively poor condition. It doesn't perform very well environmentally, and it is very much the end of its life. So there's a very pressing need to provide them with some new accommodation as part of this kind of wider building. So we'll skip maybe through some of this context because we looked at the context a little bit before with Eric, and then through. So there's a lot of work we've had to do around the trees. There's some really key trees that we've worked with the officers on about our retain, and that's how Eric developed some of his strategy around the landscaping and the gardens we talked about earlier. So a lot of what we've done is based around how we keep those key trees and we actually enhance them, we work around them, and we create better spaces than they currently are around them. Because there's some real opportunities on this site which are currently kind of missed by a lot of the car-dominated stuff that Eric talked about earlier. So how can we use those to enhance our design and to kind of make it feel like an actual place rather than a kind of slightly weird kind of 1980s bungalow land, which it kind of is at the moment. My colleague Oni is going to talk a bit more about some of the details.
Yes, sorry. We're looking to enhance the green space as much as possible. You saw some of the trees that were restricted. The elm in particular, a really large tree. It is within a few metres all the way around it of the current building. So we're releasing it and opening up as much green space along the south as possible to connect into the rest of the south that's already there. That's the landscape design as it is. And so the Mickle building will be half retained whilst construction takes place of the B1 building, and then the rest of the building is demolished to make way for replacement car parking for what's already on the site, and a few more spaces, about 20 spaces, in addition to cater for the new occupancy numbers. This is a diagram of the access. So you've got keeping the vehicular access to the north, and then showing how you access the new building. And this is how, when the master plan is in place, if it is designed how it is currently proposed, all of the pedestrian routes would be from the north and cycling as well, and minimised the vehicle access to the site. There's options for cycle parking either to the south in the wooded area or to the north on top of the service. There's a service wrap that goes around the building, which will be explained later. So that's the preference is there, but we're just seeing if that's really feasible. Car parking is here. This is just diagramming how most of the spaces are replacement spaces, and there's only 20 new spaces coming onto the site. The arrivals court is key for the design, both for the first building, for B1 itself, and also for the master plan. So the arrivals court is highlighted for the development of the building and how it's designed. This is showing how the focus of the building is onto that corner. Sorry, it's on the northeast corner, northwest corner. Sorry. So bringing out the canopy, sort of open up onto the entrance, and looking for the flow of people and the visual flow to be right across that space. Filling it with places for people to stop and collaborate or have their lunch, that type of thing. So seating and planting. The elm garden is, so the elm tree is going to be focused and it's, at the moment it's not publicly accessible. The design would mean that you could go and sit there and the design of the garden around that is key to increasing the biodiversity. At the moment that's completely built across, all of this land is built on. And then it's continuing the woodland on the south that already runs along most of the south but not behind the current building, so they would increase that and again make it accessible for people. The entrance space of B1 has been designed to be a collaboration space. It would be publicly available at the moment, so we're sort of looking at designing it in a way that people would work there, eat there, talk and cross-pollinate ideas. That's a visualisation of the two visualisations of the space and the type of furniture, which would want to bring in natural materials as much as possible, textures, make it feel very warm. Moving through into the building, then you have a central staircase, which is the key vertical circulation. So we're looking to sort of, there's a light well at the top of it to bring light into that space again. It's a space for people to stop and the tendency of the building is designed to be up to 12 different companies or research groups. So the idea of these spaces would be to allow people to meet and coordinate ideas, collision space we're calling it. There's also a spine that goes through north to south, which would open up the building visually, to have as much glazing as possible. And even though these spaces could be tenanted, they might be sort of shared tenant spaces with meeting rooms and seminar rooms, that type of thing, and entrances to the tenancies. Otherwise, the building is being left as flexible as possible, so tenancies can be larger or smaller. Someone could rent a quarter, half, full floor, depending on their needs, and also that it would be sort of, we're looking at a 60% laboratory, 40% office type of space, and there'd be full flexibility on that. The character of the building we've explored here, a stone base, so there's a plinth base on the ground floor. This is where Mickle and other facilities like it have theirs, so that they need high levels of shielding and protection, so very thick walls and not really many windows. The entrance is explored there, and we're looking to bring again on the floor of that area, the sort of solid stonework through into the entrance, so that kind of feeling to the ground. Above that, the middle, which was the tree line, you have it from the tree canopy base and top, so looking to have a completely different language at that level. We're also setting back, as you saw discussed before, so with the housing to the south, to make sure that there's no overlooking into their gardens, and also no acoustic interference for them. The cladding on that wrap is looking to be sort of angular and playful. The idea is also to give as much shading to the windows on the south as possible, using that and increasing the daylighting, so having the angles coming in and out as appropriate. The canopy is looking to extend that facade out to create a sunshade for the large amount of glazing on that corner, and also a rain canopy for when you're entering the building. This is a concept design and more looking at how that could work technically. And then up on the top, there's a large amount of plants to service what's a very heavy laboratory building. So there's actually 2 levels of plant up there. And the acoustic baffling is then angled to minimise the visualisation of that space. Here's an impression of another building designed by Eliza Morrison and the views from the Magog Down. This is a representation then of the whole building together. Construction, we're looking to enhance the thermal performance as much as possible, make it as efficient as possible. This is how the shading would work. So there'll be studies happening on to maximise daylighting while minimising overheating. And then all the different strategies, sustainability strategies that are being included, including a lot of water management, as already mentioned, blue roofs, green roofs. PV panels along the south, it's extremely good exposure, and so we're looking to maximise the amount of energy generated on site. That's everything.
That's the final slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone. And thank you very much for endeavouring to put the information into the time. I'll kick off with some questions, and I just want to remind members that we should be asking questions to seek clarification on the developer's presentation, and I'm reminding you not to express any opinions on the presentation or proposals which might suggest a closed mind. So I'd like to start myself, if I may, and I'll come to Councillor Porra, and then I'll make a list and I come back. So the first one was, can you just remind us the height of the current building on that site? And because this looks to me as if it's going to be 5 or 6 stories now, or possibly more. Could you advise us there?
Current building is a bungalow. It's 1 story, but with plant above, so you could consider it a 2-story building, I would suggest. There's flues as well above that height as well. We don't have an exact meterage.
And the new building is 5 stories plus plant?
4 inhabited stories and 1 plant level, which is tall, approximately, I'd say 5 metres height, the plant level.
Right. And the second one I had was, can you just, I know this might sound trivial, but what proportion of the new building will actually be used by the Mickle facility?
So the building is going to provide space for a number of facilities. So the Mickle is going to be circa kind of 2/3 of the ground floor. And then the rest of that ground floor space will be for a similar type of user, which is undefined at the moment. So similar kind of heavy chemistry, which has a number of the constraints around it. The remainder of the building will be for kind of allied science users, whether that's a kind of biology type user, or we've also provided provision for a chemistry type user. I don't know what the proportion is overall of the building, but hopefully that gives you a sense of the scale.
Okay, and my last is, we've seen the shape, and obviously are you planning any variation on the facades of the buildings? Perhaps that comes at a later stage, but that was just a thought.
In terms of different orientations, so different treatments, different orientations of facades. Is that the question?
Are they all going to be the same, or will you plan some variation?
So the answer is there will be some variation, but they will be through a common theme. So we've got this idea of this kind of wrap, which is that kind of faceted thing you saw. So the intent is that will be a kind of continuous approach around the building, but that will vary quite considerably depending on where you are on the facade. So that's primarily a result of the orientation and the environmental conditions. So as Fiona was saying, on the south we need greater, deeper shading. On the north we really want to have more transparency, and then east and west is a bit of a combination of the two. So the building will not look different from different facades, but you will be able to tell the difference, if that hopefully makes sense.
And the theme will cover the 3 buildings, the final, when you've planned all three of them?
I think so. Certainly, this is the case for the B1 building. The other buildings on the site are further behind in terms of where they are in design. They're kind of more at the master plan stage. We have been working. So we are two different practices, which is not a unique situation, but it's not massively common. We've been doing a lot of cross working between us and also with officers around how we kind of develop some kind of key themes for how the buildings will approach their design across the site. So Eric talked about that a little bit in his presentation about some of the kind of key levels we're setting and those kind of things. So again, the intention will be kind of materiality will be some continuity through the site, but allowing some individuality. Yeah.
That's what I was driving at.
Sorry,
whether,
yes.
whether there will be a common theme around the site. Councillor Thornborough.
How much time do we have for members to ask questions and debate? Because it just seems like a very comprehensive presentation, but I think we need more time generally. So I'm a bit disappointed we've got so little time.
Yes. So we have run over. So what should we go to? Yeah. Okay. I apologise for not being stricter. So we'll allow another 10 minutes for discussion. So, right, okay.
So can I ask my question?
Yes, certainly do.
I'd like to, nearby on the residential housing nearby, the SUD systems was really difficult to hand over. And in the two-year period before it was handed over, the SUD systems had it worked. It did the 1 in 50-year flood and the 1 in 30-year flood situation about 3 times. So I really worry that the design parameters for the sustainable drainage is not keeping up with what we're actually finding as far as rain and the heavy rains and the storms we're getting. And I think we need to, personally, I think we need to over-design the SUD systems and make them a real feature. But it's really heavy soils there, and it's really difficult to get that right. And the design tolerances were almost impossible to build. So I'd like to know what the design parameters is for that. And also for the overheating design. A few years ago, Cambridge was the hottest place in the whole country. And we had south-facing elevations which were 4 or 5 degrees hotter inside than they were outside. And I checked the CIBSI's temperature range on which the buildings had been designed, and they had been designed as required, but the temperature range stopped at 30 degrees, and we experienced 40 degrees. So again, the design parameters is not keeping up with what we're finding in reality. So maybe you could come back to Chair and Spokes and let us know. So that's just a question.
Yes. So,
but you don't have to answer it now.
So I was going to say, that's perhaps not one to answer now, but just to take away as concerns, because you've just explained to us what you're planning. So if you will just take these as thoughts away to inform your planning. Councillor Khan.
You talk about using air source heat pumps. The building will have a large south-facing wall, so you will have a lot of solar gain, even with all your design improvements. When I was generally, when using heat pumps for cooling, it's much more effective to have a ground source heat pump because you can use it in summer. You save more energy in the summer from the cooling than you do gain, basically, save it in the winter for the heating. Had you considered using ground source heat pumps on this site? Because it would seem to be something you might be worthwhile thinking nowadays for large buildings like this in particular, rather than for small houses.
Okay, so have you thought about that?
Yes, we have. We have looked at it. It's not been definitely ruled out. However, as I mentioned, it's a constrained site with very little area. When you actually take the tree root protection zone out, there's not a lot of site left. So,
okay. So it's
the space to actually get a ground array in is very limited. Okay. It's not completely ruled out. It's something that we'll look at more at the next stage. I would also say that the advancements in simultaneous heating and cooling heat pumps is such that the efficiencies are getting pretty good now. And ground source you know, in the right conditions could still be better, but actually over the year, with simultaneous heating and cooling, we get pretty close.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Councillor Stobart?
Chair, thank you. So I should just raise a series of questions, maybe not for answering now. So first of all, on optimisation, you talked about optimisation. I was wondering if you'd included the trees, the contribution from the trees in the optimisation. And is that a gathering science? Because we'd be very interested to get a feel for how that's done. That's my first question. Second, the car parking space, why isn't it underground? You speak of a constrained site, and you know, let's put the cars underground for lots of good reasons. I know it would add to the cost, but there's and I've not understood it because there is surface car parking in the plan. What is the on-site generation? Because we talk often about solar PV, but vertical axis wind turbines, compact vertical axis wind turbines are increasingly available. And you talk about a very heavy energy consumption, 7 MVA. To offset even some of that is going to be helpful to grid capacity demand. So again, one other question. And just a final comment on the collaboration space, which I thought was really good. You must never underestimate in that context the importance of collaboration space, because academics love to hang out and drink coffee. So I thought that was very welcome, but there must be some mechanism for keeping it open a lot, you know, and that oils the wheels of innovation for sure.
Great, thank
Chair.
you. Councillor Porrill?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I won't dwell on the positive bits because you're probably more interested in knowing the bits where I have some questions. So would it be fair to characterise some of this as a speculative development, as in a commercial lab use? So I'm just interested, obviously, normal hospital applications, Adam Brooks, CBC, kind of relate often to research or development. I make no comments whether that's good or bad. It's just interesting that actually the Mickle bit is a very small part of one floor. So I suppose the note I would make is it's considerably higher. I appreciate the stepping up. It's slightly more leaping potentially. And it is coming above the tree canopy, and that is to provide more commercial space. So I'm interested about the balance between how high you're going. I didn't quite understand, with you're replacing the parking plus 20, will that be permanently on that small site, or will it eventually move to the kind of, it will eventually, just because obviously my other thought is I would almost rather have, well, one could argue there's a balance between a lower building but taking over some of the parking spaces. I think Councillor Stobart also mentioned if you've got a constrained site. Again, I always mention there's cargo biking, cycle parking. You know, I think generally our committees are keen to find different ways other than having parking spaces or shared parking spaces, car clubs, because again, a lot of your users, I imagine, will be cycling to work and may have their children with them or may need accessible cycles. And I suppose we've talked a lot at certainly City about tree value. So if you are taking down trees, just stick in another new one. It isn't necessarily replacing the same value, though I do note you are obviously using that as a big constraint on the site and working with the trees. But again, I think it would be useful for the committee to see if you are removing trees, how you're planning to add that back in. But I suppose my main concern, main issue I would raise is the sort of the massing and the height versus the uses and the social benefits. So thank you, Chair.
I'm going in the order that people put their hands up. Councillor Smart.
I should just say the applicant isn't Adam Brooks, but I do work for Adam Brooks. So I want to speak about the architecture of the building. So I think you made a strategic error in your presentation. You took too long and spoke about energy and trees too much, not about the architecture of the buildings. I'm interested in that, so that's my opinion. Maybe only, possibly. I know lots of other councillors are more interested in trees. So you said it's a bungalow from the 80s, the one there at the moment, but what is this? Also, what's it made of? You spoke a lot about stuff, but you didn't say what it's sort of made of. And why is it 3 buildings if it's, you talk about optimisation, But surely one building is more optimal than three, so I'm not quite clear on that. And labs, 60%, so where is the water coming from?
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Right, then Councillor Fain.
Thank you, Chair. I have to start off by saying I haven't seen the plans pack yet, which has been sent to me, so some of this may become clear to me later. Obviously, couldn't pick up all the detail from your presentation, but very helpful. It looked to me as though the step-back roof will be partially, perhaps 65%, I'm not sure, PV on the south-west, maybe east sides, obviously not north sides. And you referred at the end to the views from Magog Down and the hills, the new viewpoint at Wandlebury, no doubt. I guess you'll be producing LVIAs at a later stage to see this. But if there is a significant amount of PV, then clearly glint may be one of the factors that you'll be looking at. I can see that you've already taken all of this into account, as we expect. And then on the blue roofs, perhaps this will become clear to me from reading the pack. It just wasn't quite clear to me what techniques you're going to use for reducing the rate of runoff from those roofs. But don't worry about answering now. No doubt that can become clear later. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. You said, was I correct in hearing that you are the same firm that's preparing the master plan for the entire campus?
Yes, yeah, Allies and Rosen is working on the framework, CVC framework as well.
So, in that context, is there a transport master plan for the site? And then, so how does the parking and the modal mix fit with this? How does this development proposal fit with your emerging transport strategy? Because we know there's pressure for development on the entire site, and that it's pretty much at capacity already. So, how's it going to work? Movement.
Just a short answer on that, but yes, there's a transport strategy that's been developed as part of the CVC framework, and that is based on a trip budget on increase of area, but it's also in terms of uses, so not all users are, they require all the spaces, as it were. So, so that's been, at the moment, been developed as part of the framework, and as we develop the strategy for 4V sites, then we've been obviously coordinating that in how the phases are going to work. So as Iona and Nick presented, there's going to be phase one, there's provision of car park phase one, but that eventually moves out into centralized provision of car park elsewhere as part of the framework, which is going to be a series of multi-story car parks. The nearest one is on the site just south of the Children's Hospital. So we've been sort of working together with the transport consultant of the CVC framework and our transport consultant, who's Ramble, in order to develop a strategy, a phase strategy for the future. So we'll make sure that that's all covered in the application of the building and eventually the outline of the master plan.
Thank you. Did you have any other questions, Councillor Smith? Okay, thank you. I think it's worth pointing out that we'd very much like you to bring your master plan to JDCC. We've been asking for this for many years, and I would very much like to see how the planning for the whole site is being phased and progressed with consideration of all the parameters that you've already thought about in terms of water, transport, electricity, etc. Councillor Thornborough.
Yes, just going on for that, it'd be really good when you talk about the transport, can you use the transport hierarchy and tell us about people walking first, then cycling, then public transport, and at the bottom, private car use. and as well as the fitting into the overall transport plan, I'm really interested in the overall landscape plan as well and how this fits in with that. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. What we'll do is we'll write up those questions and send them to you, and we'd be very appreciative if you'd come back with some answers for us. And also, but most importantly, think about that in your evolution of your plan. And also, we would very much like you to come back to JDCC with a master plan for the whole site. Councillor Smart.
Well, I've lost track, but don't we get answers to questions that we ask? Isn't that helpful to everyone concerned?
Yes, but unfortunately, because the applicants took rather a long time and in rather great detail, we didn't have time to go through the answers. Unless
we're all still here. I mean, I'm ready.
Can I ask you, we have another applicant waiting. Can I ask you whether you're happy that the questions are answered online, or would you like the applicants to answer some of them? Councillor Thornborough?
I have to leave at 1 o'clock, and I don't want to miss being able to vote on the next application.
Okay. So we will look forward to, if other members are mindful of that too, and we all have time constraints, we'll look forward to receiving your answers to our questions in due course. Sorry, Councillor Smart, we'll get that on in writing. Thank you. So, thank you for that. And we'll move on in that case. So thank you very much indeed for coming, and we look forward to your answers in due course. Thank you. Members, would you like 5 minutes before the next application? Okay, thank you. So we're at 11 o'clock. So Thank you, Claire. We're going live. We're live now, members. Thank you. So we're returning to the Joint Development Control Committee, and we're on to item 5, which is, bear with me, 23/01487/FUL and 23/1509/FUL, which is the Vitam Building, St John's Innovation Park, Cowley Road, Cambridge, CB4 0WS, and the principal planner, Katie Christodoulides, will introduce it. Oh, sorry, Mairead. Sorry, I do apologise. Mairead O'Sullivan will introduce the report. Thank you, Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. So we're dealing with 2 planning applications today with 2 reference numbers, but just to highlight that it is one single proposal, but with 2 decision notices to be issued. And just to flag, I will get onto the amendment sheet in the next slide, but there has been an amendment to the description of development just to tweak that the cycle parking is no longer in the basement. I will explain this as part of my presentation as well. And the proposal before us today is about the demolition of the existing Vitam building and replacement with a new research and development building. So moving on to the amendment sheet, there are a few sort of minor items on there. As I say, the description of development is tweaked to remove reference to cycle parking being in the basement. So that's the first 2 items, as there's 2 descriptions. There is a minor amendment to the text at 13.11 as the plant level was incorrectly referred to as being level 6. There are 5 levels in the building and it's at level 5. And then there's a couple of minor tweaks to conditions, which are there twice, as I say, as there would be 2 decision notices. So condition 20 incorrectly referred to reserved matters applications. So that's, the trigger on that has been amended, and then on condition 36, which is the bat and bird boxes, that incorrectly referred to dwellings. So that has been removed.
Can I just clarify that? The reason that the reference to reserved matters is inappropriate is because this is a full application.
Yes, that's right. It was just a drafting error with a standard condition. And then just verbally, I have an additional update. So the last condition, condition 35 around water conservation measures, we've just reworded this condition and added a little bit more detail. And I've included the wording here with, there would be 2 separate conditions, but I've given the reason with both policies at the end. We're recommending a similar condition to what was originally proposed, but with more detail. It's around compliance with the water conservation measures put forward. Okay. So the application site, we're in the North East Cambridge area on the edge of the city. The site edged red is here, is the Vitam building. Just to provide a few of the kind of contextual elements, the Jane Costin Bridge is here. We've got the Cambridge Water Recycling Centre, or the Wastewater Treatment Centre as it's sometimes known here. And then I referred to in my report the adjacent St John's site, which is here, which has planning permission for 3 new buildings, but this has not been implemented yet. I will come to that in a bit more detail later on in the presentation. And then just a satellite view, the purple line here represents the administrative boundary, with Cambridge City being on the kind of south and east element, and South Cambs to the north and west. So you'll see that just the very edge, western edge of the building is within South Cambridge here at the moment, hence the need for the 2 planning applications. And again, just to go back over those kind of contextual elements of the Cambridge Water Recycling Centre, Jane Costin Bridge to Milton, St John's site where the Dirac building is coming forward, and we're generally in this St John's site here. The Morris Wilkes building, which has been the first plot to be redeveloped is here. So this has actually been built out, and I will come to this again later on in my presentation. And then the Merlin Place site, which was at JDCC last committee, is just down here. So the site lies within current strategic policies within the existing local plans. We've got the Cambridgeshire local plan covers the area around the train station, and the rest of the allocation is within the City Council area and is covered by Policy 15, the Cambridge Northern Fringe East and New Railway Station area of major change. And this is the sort of precursor to the area action plan. And then just to touch upon it, the site lies within the area that is covered by the proposed North East Cambridge Area Action Plan. As I outline in my report, the AAP currently has limited or little weight, but the development is not considered to prejudice the wider development of the AAP, although, as I will come to, that there is a discrepancy in terms of the heights proposed going beyond what is set out in the Area Action Plan. So I believe you had a look at this slide in the last committee as well, but I thought it helpful just to touch on the different applications at different stages that are coming forward in the area. So all of the orange plots are pre-app at the moment, the core site being the kind of biggest one and closest to the site. The red sections are current live planning applications. We've got the Brookgate site, which has been appealed, the Merlin Place site, which was at JDCC last month, and the Vitam building site here. And then, as I've mentioned, the blue site here being the St. John's site with the Dirac building, which has planning permission. So the application was subject to a pre-application developer briefing to JDCC in January of this year, as well as Cambridgeshire Quality Panel and Disability Consultative Panel. I'm not going to go through every element that responded to that in this slide, as that would be very textual, but it's covered within section 10 of my report, and I'll try to kind of weave it through my presentation areas where members expressed an interest and changes that have happened as a result of those. And to flag that since the application has been submitted, there have been amendments to the scheme. There were originally an objection from the urban design and landscape officers, and additional setbacks have been included on level 4 to try and overcome this objection and have removed those objections. There's also a small extension in this kind of lesser sensitive part of the building to try and make up for some of the floor space lost. And as I've mentioned before, cycle parking has been relocated from the basement to the ground floor. So I have a site plan here to illustrate the form of the building. It's 2 interlocking block forms. We have, in terms of the kind of landscape features, a public square here adjacent to Cowley Road and the Jane Costin Bridge. There's the colonnade as well at ground floor, which is a covered area, part of the kind of layering of the building design, which we'll see when we come to that element. In terms of access, pedestrians and cyclists can come from Milton area via the Jane Costin Bridge, as well as from Cowley Road. Cyclists would then come off and be actually on the road on Cowley Road here and access the cycle store via a dropped curb here, and cycle parking is in this area. Vehicular access is further to the west, with basement car park access here, servicing further within the site. And there's also space for a cargo bike for servicing for kind of last mile deliveries. And this element in the dogleg of the site here is a single story structure for generators. So in terms of the ground floor plan, pedestrians will access the building via the public square, with the main entrance area being here. there is level access to the building and lifts provided to all of the floors, and all of the terraces will have level access as well. The yellow area is a sort of communal space with cafe and kind of breakout space, and the green areas are lettable areas. The building could be occupied by a single occupier, or it could be in multiple occupancies, and is laid out with different lettable areas. Then moving on to the cycle parking, as I say, cycle parking is now at ground floor. This is considered to be a positive change as it provides a more welcoming entrance for pedestrians. There's a large amount of cycle parking provided, for 40% of the mode share. So that's 280 cycle parking spaces within the secure store, as well as 28 visitor cycle parking spaces which are within the public realm. The breakdown of different stand types provided is considered to be policy compliant. There is a large amount of two-tier spaces, but Appendix L of the local plan does allow for this in non-residential developments where a large amount of cycle parking is provided, subject to 20% spaces being Sheffield standards, and that's what we have here. As well, there are supporting facilities for the cycle parking, which will be accessed in this kind of core here. There's a stairs and lift which leads to the basement, where there are showers, lockers, drying rooms. So moving to the car parking, which is provided in the basement, there are 99 spaces proposed. This has been reduced since the application has been submitted, from 102. There are 5% blue badge spaces provided. The overall level of car parking is compliant with the NEC transport evidence base, which requires a maximum of 29% mode share, and what's being provided here is 24% mode share. It's also a reduction in the number of existing car parking spaces, as there are 108 car parking spaces on the site as it is. And then in terms of potential displacement car parking, there is a Section 106 contribution requested for parking restrictions in Milton, should they be required, as the site is within walking distance of Milton. So just briefly to touch on the floor plans, level 4 shows the terrace areas here, which would, which would include planters. Should the Cambridge Water Recycling Centre be relocated, these could also be amenity spaces and would have level access to them, but use of these for amenity purposes won't be possible while the Water Recycling Centre is in situ. And then just to touch on the plant level, which has a green roof and then plant being set back from the edge of the roof. The plant would be covered by a mesh screen that would be planted with greenery. So I'll touch on the elevations, but I'll move on to sort of more CGIs and visuals from the landscape and visual impact assessment, as they're probably easier to understand. But just to identify some of the kind of key features of the building. So the top elevation being the northwest, which is where we have the basement, car park access and kind of servicing area. You can see the terracing and the plant level, which would be, as I say, quite green, as it will have climbing plants. The bottom elevation is to the A14. The dotted line, which you may be able to see here, is the line of the trees. And when I come to the more CGIs, we'll see the amendments to the scheme which introduce this additional element of terracing here. And then we've got the southwest elevation to Cowley Road on the top here. You can see the colonnade of the building with glazing underneath. You can see the way the fenestration changes as it moves up the building, larger elements of glazing lower down. the different areas of terracing that we've planted, and the public square here, and then similarly this the elevation towards the sort of Jane Costin Bridge with the public square, which has a feature tree here and the main entrance to the building here. And then in terms of the sections, we've got basement car parking, a larger floor to ceiling height on the ground floor. Generally, the floor to ceiling heights allow for flexibility in future should another use come forward, and I know that was something that members were interested in as part of the briefing. The lab and office space divide between the building. Lab space would be provided on the kind of less active areas, so towards the A14 and the kind of servicing elevation, with the office spaces being closer to the colonnade and the public square. So I've got some visuals to illustrate the amendments to the scheme. So what we're looking at the moment is the elevation as submitted in April. And as I say, there were concerns about the impact of the proposal as submitted from the Jane Costin Bridge and Cowley Road. There were concerns that it appeared quite overbearing. So this elevation, the key area to look is here, where the additional setback is provided. So if I move to the next slide, you'll see the additional area of terracing here and the setback, which provides some relief, pulling the mass of the building back and adding to that kind of layering. So maybe if I just go back and forth one more time, just for clarity. So here we have as submitted and as proposed. And then again, the Cowley Road elevation as submitted, there were concerns about the length of the facade and it appearing quite blocky. So here, as of the last slide, you'll recall, there is a setback in this area, but also there is a further setback here on the other end of the building as well. So those are the two areas to look at. So this is the scheme as amended. So as I say, additional setback here and here. This is generally considered to reduce the overall length and kind of blockiness of the building. And then finally moving on to the views from Milton. So this is on the other side of the Jane Costin Bridge towards Tesco, looking across, and this is as submitted. And then as you'll recall, it was in this area that the amendments are, and as submitted, as amended even. So here we have a site section showing the height of the proposed building in comparison to the St. John's area. So as I mentioned, the Morris Wilks building, this has been built out. And then the key site and building that the massing has been informed by is the Dirac building on the adjacent site, which has planning permission. And you can see that the heights of the buildings are very comparable. And then to note that the green line on this plan, which hopefully you can make out, this is the NEC AAP height level. Then this is just a helpful slide to show the kind of point around the length of the facade and how it compares to other buildings. So it's quite comparable to the Dirac building, which is this area here, Dirac building here, and the Morris Wilks building. And also just to pause and reflect on the fact that the St. John's Innovation Park is subject to a master plan. Now, the master plan has been prepared by St. John's and doesn't hold any actual weight in our decision making, but it does tell us the intention for that site to be redeveloped, sort of regardless of the status of the AAP. Moving on to trees. So the proposed building sits further back in the site and requires some tree removal in this tree buffer that runs between the site and the A14 and runs beyond the site also. So there are 31 trees being removed and 70 trees being planted. I should point out that all of the larger trees within the site have been retained and were seen as a constraint to development. And the trees being removed in this buffer are generally the kind of lower quality trees. The tree officer has raised concerns but not a formal objection to this impact in terms of the relationship with the tree buffer. The additional planting proposed in the tree buffer area here is quite large semi-mature trees, which will help with the screening of the building and are shown on the visuals. The tree officer has noted some concerns about the inclusion of these kind of larger semi-mature trees and their impact on some of the existing trees. But a condition is recommended requiring replacement planting should any of the existing trees shown to be retained fail within 5 years. And any new trees, those would be required to be replaced should they fail via the landscape condition that's protected in that sense. But overall, the tree impact has been considered to be acceptable. Moving on to the odour impact, as I noted, the site lies adjacent to the Cambridge Water Recycling Centre. The City Council commissioned a study into the odour impact from the Cambridge Water Recycling Centre, and this visual is from that study. So the site is this black star here approximately, and it lies within the odour contours 5 and 6, which mean that it does require, it says development may be suitable, as you'll see in this element of the table here, which is new and extensions or expansions of existing business and research and development uses. And it requires that there are no external seating areas and sealed external facades to the building with mechanical ventilation with odour abatement technology. So the applicant has demonstrated that the building will be a sealed building with what they've submitted. They're providing mechanical ventilation with filtration, and the environmental health officer is satisfied with these measures subject to a compliance condition. And then the areas around the building cannot be used while the water recycling centre is in situ, and a building management condition is recommended to be provided, and this would have to explain how these areas will be managed while the water recycling centre is in situ, with further provision should the water recycling centre relocate, that further details would be provided and sort of seating and further public realm measures could be introduced at that stage. But ultimately, the development in terms of the kind of public realm around the building and the amenity to occupiers is considered acceptable in its own right. So moving on to sustainability, the building is targeting BREEAM Excellent and is comfortably meeting that at the sort of pre-assessment stage, as well as targeting the WELL Gold standard. It's taking an all-electric approach with a 37.8% reduction in carbon emissions using the heat pumps and solar panels. It has an EPC rating A, and a whole life carbon assessment has been submitted with the application. And then on the water conservation area, there's a water conservation strategy which we've recommended a compliance condition around, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation. And the BREEAM calculations show 74.87% improvement over the baseline condition with all 5 WAT 01 credits. And in terms of water use, it's estimated that it will be very much comparable with the existing building. So the estimated fresh water consumption for the use is about 9,400 litres per day. The existing building, which is under-occupied, uses about 9,000 litres of water per day, but should it be fully occupied, it's predicted that it would use 13,600 to 17,100 litres per day. And then in terms of how the water conservation strategy is achieved, it's this hierarchical approach to minimising water consumption, starting with point of use efficiencies, low water fittings, then system efficiencies, and then also having alternative sources of water for grey water. So grey water recycling, rainwater harvesting, as well as collecting water from the air conditioning units. So to touch on the adjacent site, I thought it would be helpful just to include some slides showing the St. John's development, which is consented. It's these 3 buildings here. So this top view is from the landscape and visual impact assessment associated with the St. John's development, and the massing of these 2 buildings is included in some of my slides later on in the landscape and visual impact assessment for the this application. And then the bottom side, just to give you an idea of the sort of architectural treatment of that scheme and how this building would relate quite well to that this sort of environment. And then again, just briefly to touch on this for information, that this is sort of how the adjacent site would appear when should it come forward. So here we have a CGI of the proposed building, just to highlight some of the kind of key design elements. We've got the public square here. This is the Jane Costin Bridge, and it's kind of looking from Cowley Road. Public square here with the colonnade, which sort of wraps around the building here. You've got the different areas of terracing as well. And cyclists would come off the footpath over here and access the cycle store down here, which should be this. Well, it's further down the colonnade on this plan. This is just further along Cowley Road. You can see some of the cycle parking in the public realm for visitors. I should highlight that there is some seating shown on these plans, and as I flagged earlier, it's not possible for there to be sort of areas of seating while the water recycling centre is in situ. But these areas and the detail could be provided at a later date through that building management plan condition. And then, so this is the same view that we saw just a moment ago, but this is from the landscape and visual impact assessment. So this is a verified view, like a rendered view of the proposal. In terms of the architectural treatment as well, I don't think I've highlighted the materials. The base of the building will be brick with aluminium cladding on the upper floors. And then this is the view from Cowley Road. As you'll recall, it was sort of, we had amendments in this area here with this additional area of terracing to reduce the length, and again as well in this area here. And this is the view from the Jane Costin Bridge. So this planting here is taller than existing, and this is the proposed planting being shown in situ. But again, it's this area here where the setback has happened. And then from Milton, again, it's this sort of area here where the amendments. And then this is from the bridge towards Milton Road. You can see this is the St. John's scheme, as I mentioned, is shown in the visual here. And overall, the kind of visual impact is very comparable to the St. John's development. You can see that both do sort of break the skyline, but there is lots of tall planting that breaks it up, and it's generally in line with that sort of relationship. And then this being a slightly further view, you can see the 2 buildings at St. John's and the Vitam building, and see how that sort of skyline, the relationship is very similar. And again, just at the bottom, we've got a kind of longer view from the Jane Costin Bridge, which again shows the St. John's. So just to conclude that the recommendation is for approval. The planning balance is included at the end of the report, and that is subject to conditions and informatives and a Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mairead, and thank you also for those members who attended the site visit on Monday. And just to remind members that we also had a developer briefing from the developers in January this year, and I think the things that were raised then have been incorporated in this revised plan, so thank you very much. So, right, we have for the developer Adam Vlodicek-Black, if you'd like to come and present the application to us, thank you. And I should say Adam is the Director of Design and Construction UK and Europe for Breakthrough Properties, who are the applicant. And would you like to introduce your colleague, or would she like to introduce herself?
Hi, Emma Woods, Sphere 25, we're the planning consultants working on the scheme.
There is a microphone in front of you as well, if that's helpful. Okay, thank you. So Adam, would you like to proceed?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mairead, not just for today, but for a collaborative pre-application process over the last 14 months, which has supported the evolution and refinement of our proposals. I'm Adam Vlodicek-Black, Director of Design and Construction at Breakthrough Properties, the applicant for the scheme. Breakthrough Properties was founded in 2019 with a vision to become a world-leading developer and operator for life science real estate. Put simply, our mission is to create sustainable environments that lead to scientific discoveries that improve human health. Breakthrough Properties is a developer and investor that's a long-term asset holder, meaning we aspire to hold this building for its full economic life. So why Cambridge? Investing in Cambridge has been a top priority for us, driven by the quality of the city's knowledge economy, the vision of local and national government, and the university's pedigree in developing world-leading talent base and in generating novel intellectual property. Our facility will complement and support the growth of the life sciences ecosystem by providing critical real estate capacity to scale existing businesses and attract world-leading life sciences companies to Cambridge. Now, our approach for Vitam has been founded on 3 key principles. First, to deliver a respectful architectural landmark for Cambridge. Vitam features exemplary design quality with longevity, well-being and sustainability at its core. Designed thoughtfully by world-renowned architect Henning Larsen, the building will comprise a modern and flexible workplace with a lively and inclusive community. The sustainable architecture blends together with its green surrounding and promotes biodiversity. The design features an active and transparent ground floor to integrate with the innovation park. Now, we've listened and addressed concerns on landscape and visual impact. This included a reduction in height so Vitam is lower than other approved buildings on the innovation park and a softening of the massing in key views, which has successfully appeased concerns. Our second key principle is exemplary sustainability. Vitam will be built to exceed local and national sustainability targets, including an 11.7% biodiversity net gain, 26% improvement over Part L of the building regulations, a WELL rating of Platinum and a BREEAM rating of Excellent. We've respected the importance of the woodland to the northern boundary, understanding it provides a protective buffer along the A14, and as such, 70 semi-mature trees will be planted as part of our proposals. We understand the challenges of water infrastructure. Vitam will be highly water efficient and consumes no more water than the existing smaller building. This has been achieved through minimising consumption, efficient system design, and maximising water recovery. Our third key principle is sustainable transport. We understand the concern of parking in Milton. As such, we're committed to no net increase in parking provision to ensure no additional pressure is applied to peak hour trips. We've also agreed the mode share, discouraging single occupancy car drivers, including a reduction in car parking provision, the use of booking spaces and regular monitoring. We believe our plans present a significant opportunity for the city to enhance its global status as a life science superpower with an iconic new building that's been designed collaboratively to address community feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, admirably. 1 second short of 3 minutes, so thank you very much indeed. Well done you. Members, remember that we ask our questions of our case officer. Would anybody like to kick off with questions? So, Councillor Thornborough.
I just want to ask about the water, because we're being told that the water will be no more use than the existing, but how, I think we're in a new area about how, thinking about water and what's provided and information about whether that can be met. And is there a way to be sure,
Yes.
going forward, that the figure set in, the design figure is actually met? And if it's not met, do we have any enforcement powers? Yes.
So, Councillor Thornborough, I also have asked that question because we're talking about a building that has 4 times the current floor space, and we're being told it will use no more than the current building. So I think at this point it would be appropriate to refer to Mairead on that question, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the applicant has provided a lot of information about all of the different measures they're going to use to reduce water consumption. So these are, as I outlined in that slide, around design elements, so like around how the system works, fixtures and fittings used, and then having sort of rainwater, grey water recycling, and bringing in less fresh water in that sense, so you're reusing water. What we can do is we can have a condition that requires them to provide that information, like to provide what they've set out in the water conservation strategy. They would need to comply with that. But in terms of the levels of water that they use, we wouldn't have any enforceability around monitoring that. That's not something that could be done through the planning system. That wouldn't be enforceable.
So we, just before you come back, that we proposed a condition, did we not? I think was this an additional condition?
Thank you, Chair. So it's condition 35, and it was a condition that was recommended, but some additional words have been included just to make it more sort of copper bottom the condition.
Okay, so condition 35 is on page.
So I'll include the amended wording because it is an amended wording that I'm proposing.
Of the agenda. So Mairead, do you want to add in? Yeah.
So this is the wording I'm suggesting. So it's prior to occupation of the building, all of these fixtures and fittings and the water recycling measures that are outlined in this water conservation strategy document, which would be an approved document, will need to be installed and functional and maintained thereafter. And that's sort of as far as the planning system can go. It can require those measures, but not the sort of actual monitoring of the water levels.
Because we are informed about the metered usage in the existing building, and we had asked whether we could meter the usage in the new building. Councillor Thornborough, would you like to come back?
Yeah, so my understanding is, so for BREEAM, to be BREEAM, BREEAM requires commissioning after the building is built, not just design standards, which is very good. So I'm assuming that if BREEAM 5 credits for water must be commissioned in the same way as they have to show the energy efficiency, they will have to show the water efficiency. So that's very good. But I think that my concerns about this condition is it's prior to occupation. I think water is so important that I would suggest that it should, the design information should be required and signed off before construction, in my opinion. Thanks. I've also got...
so just to clarify that, so you're saying you're requesting whether it can be before construction? Okay, thank you. Yes, can Mairead come back on that, please?
So, I mean, this water conservation strategy document that I have referenced here, this has been provided with the application. This is an existing document. And there is a BREEAM sort of design stage and post-construction condition. So there is that 2 phases as well. I don't know that we would be getting any further information through having a kind of prior to construction element to the condition.
Can I, through you, Chair, the problem with prior to occupation, if the design is not to expectations in this respect, it can't be modified. So I think the measures need to be fully understood. I may be not understanding the condition, but I think it...
Your
Do you
concern is that
understand my
if it doesn't meet it, there's nothing you can do because the building's already built. So Philippa Kelly can perhaps help us.
Please, Chair. Thank you. So the water conservation strategy has been submitted and has been agreed and confirmed as acceptable. Condition 35 as amended, which is on your screen in front of you, requires the installation, the implementation of the measures that are set out in the strategy to be implemented within the building. Therefore, it wouldn't be appropriate to have that as a pre-commencement condition. It needs to be installed, tested and operational before the first use of the building.
And if the usage transpired to be higher than was predicted, how would that be monitored? Or is there any way of monitoring that?
As Mairead explained earlier, the challenge is in relation to the enforcing of that, and the assessment of that is not something which the local planning authority can have control over. It is the building operator, the owner, that would be responsible for that. The building would be smart metered, so they would have the ability to see the water usage, but it would be within the remit of the building operator, and it's not the local planning authority's responsibility. It's an issue that we are challenged by. It's something that we are having further discussions in respect of the Cambridge Water Scarcity Group. We're hoping to push and get clarity on this issue in due course, but for the purposes of this application, we believe we've gone as far as we can with this condition.
Councillor Thornborough.
Through you, Chair. I think in the same way as we were wanting transport strategies for one site set in the context of a larger site, really we should be asking for a water strategy for one site set in the context with a larger site. Really, that's what we should be asking in the time, because of the situation we are in. And it's fantastic that this building is not making the situation any worse. But what we do want is overall to make the situation better. And we know that the overall current use needs to be reduced. So if this building if this site doesn't provide a reduction and it's not making it worse, that's great. But overall, collectively, collective responsibility of this landowner is that we look to reductions. So I'm just saying it would have been good if there's a kind of wider wide understanding about this. Can I just for one other point is the replacement tree issue. It's condition 19. I think replacement trees also need to be maintained for 5 years.
I think that's what the condition says. I was going to ask whether
I think it says
yes, that's right.
Within 5 years they have to be replaced,
that's
but
right.
those replacement trees then need to be maintained for 5 years, because we are finding in some cases that they're not maintained, and then new trees are put in, and the obligations finish then, and those new trees are not maintained and they die.
Absolutely, and in fact I was going to ask the same thing, that the condition to replace should not only apply to the newly planted trees, the existing trees, but it should also apply to the newly planted trees, because these are going to be large trees going in, which, with all due respect, are more likely to fail. So we need to have because 19 refers to if any tree shown to be retained, So could we add in phraseology that enables that to extend to replacement trees or newly planted trees as well? Mairead?
The hard and soft landscape condition, condition 14, part B, if within a period of 5 years from the date of planting or replacement planting, any tree or plant is removed, uprooted or destroyed, dies, another tree or a plant of the same species and size as that shall be planted. So I think that...
Okay, that's sorted. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Sorry, the replacement tree should also be maintained for 5 years.
It says, if within a period of 5 years from the date of planting, oh, you're saying, and for the subsequent period of 5 years also. Yes, that's true. We have said that in the past, that when there's a replacement tree, that should also benefit from a 5-year protection. So And I know we've done that on other sites. So, 10-year commitment, folks. Can we amend that accordingly? Are you?
If that's what the members decide, yes.
Okay, are you keen that we should give that 10-year protection? Yes, okay, good, everyone's nodding. So can we add that in, please, that any replacement tree should also benefit from a 5-year protection? Thank you.
I'll make two more short comments. One is the well-being rating. I'm really pleased that the applicant has told us it's platinum. I think the well-being standards are really good, and it's not, we don't require them, but it is coming in, and it's really good to understand what level on each building that's been achieved. And also, because land values are so high, my general feeling is that we should be building as tall as feasibly appropriate, so in all the right locations in Cambridge. So I think the height is good for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thornborough. Councillor Porra.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to congratulate the applicant on the aim to maintain the same level of water despite quadrupling the size. I think this is the kind of thing we really want developers to be doing. Take Councillor Thorn's point, it's not making it better, but it could be a lot worse. So, and I would really hope the developer would actually be quite open with us about how that works, because I think we need to learn from these kind of early stage schemes. If we're struggling, let's find out why, and let's make sure we pass on that knowledge to other people, because it will be so critical. And we know the earlier you go, the more likely there might be some problems. I hope not, though. So I had two minor condition amendments I wanted to request first. 3.7 paragraph refers to the large feature tree. I would just like the planning office to consider letting our tree officer have some oversight to make sure that is the right species, because obviously we can stick a massive tree in, but it might not thrive. So I just wondered if Mairead would accept that. And secondly, the planters and greenery on the upper levels, which I have to say to me do enhance the design considerably with the levellings that's taken place since we talked in January. Can we condition that greenery needs to be maintained? Because I wasn't entirely sure if that was covered by the tree condition, because I don't think there are necessarily trees in planters. So that was just two questions to the officer. So my biggest concerns at the moment is the narrowing of the buffer between the A14 and the building, because that screening to me is very important. So I don't know if the officer could talk a little more about the 70 trees that are going in, because obviously to bring the building line back a lot further than the existing site, there is going to be some loss of those trees, I appreciate. But, you know, it is an important visual and acoustic barrier, actually, though I note, obviously, it will be sealed anyway. Second thing, it's disappointing that only 20% of the cycle stands as Sheffield. I appreciate with the local plan we can't object, but again, just a note. And my usual request about cargo bikes, you'll probably need more than you think, because people will be cycling to school with and with their equipment with them. And the showers are still in the basement, which again is slightly disappointing. Not, I think, reason for rejection, but again, you have to park your bike and then go downstairs. Normally, we prefer them to be at the same level. I definitely support aiming for BREEAM outstanding, not excellent. I mean, excellent is the lowest standard we should be going for. We should be pushing towards outstanding. The other concern I have is the height. I do take Councillor Thornborough's point that, you know, sometimes we do need to build high, but this is a substantial expansion of the footprint, so we're sort of going high and big. So I suppose I'm still weighing up how much that concerns me, whether or not it's enough to vote against or not. And finally, I think 18.17 talks about the infrastructure delivery plan for the Hartree site and about this fair and equitable proportionate acceptance of each developer for power and water. I just wondered if the officer could kind of comment if this is within those bounds. I mean, certainly I think for water, one would hope it may well be, but I know it doesn't have significant weight, but it would just be a useful guide to see how far out or not this development is. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mairead, can you address, I can prompt you. So, number one was water, not better, but not worse. Was that just an observation? And was there a condition to maintain the planters on the upper level? Is that, I wondered if that came under the landscaping.
So I think the detail of planting and it being maintained comes under the landscaping condition. So that has that kind of 5 years. And then there's also the building management plan, so that's condition 9. So so that area, the terraces and the planting has a positive visual impact, but also those spaces could be available for amenity purposes for employees should the Cambridge Water Recycling Centre relocate. So I think it's important to have some flexibility so that there can be some maybe tables and chairs and space there for people to use that space as well. And the building management plan deals with all of the external areas around the building, both before and after, should the Cambridge Water Recycling Centre relocate.
Sorry, Mairead, on that one, Councillor Porra was asking about whether while the water treatment centre is still operational, will there be an ongoing commitment to maintain the plantings on those terraces?
Yeah, so under the landscaping conditions, as we touched on earlier around trees, there's a requirement to maintain planting for sort of a 5-year period of time. And then in terms of the building management plan, that sort of looks at how all of those external spaces are used. So it's a sort of twofold.
You raised concerns about narrowing of the buffer.
I just want to check the other condition about checking that we're happy with the species of the large feature tree. And then I think, is it helpful if I run through them again? The buffer and how the tree planting will damage or reinstate that. The basement showers, the height being considerably higher, and then whether it's fair and equitable, to quote from the infrastructure delivery plan. I think they were the 4 points.
So the large featured tree, can the tree officer be involved in?
So again, the hard and soft landscape condition it requires planting plans to be submitted. So we would have final sight of that. So that detail could be agreed through that condition.
I lost track of whether some of yours were comments or questions.
So it's asking the officer about the buffer planting, because I'm concerned about the narrowing, and the other was really about this fair and equitable delivery.
Okay. Narrowing of the buffer?
So the narrowing of the buffer. So as we saw on the site visit, that is obvious in the plans, the building does protrude much closer to this tree buffer and requires trees to be removed. So the buffer, most of the trees within the buffer are category C, kind of lower quality trees. Their sort of benefit and the positive of the buffer is more around the amount of trees there. And what this scheme is doing is removing some of these kind of smaller trees and replacing them with larger trees, semi-mature trees that will help with the screening of the building. And now the tree officer, as I have noted, has raised some concerns about the kind of larger trees coming in and their impact on those existing trees. But we have that condition 19, which seeks to, should any of those trees shown to be retained fail, that they would be required to be replaced within 5 years.
Okay, and we've already said that those replacement trees should also be covered by a further 5 years.
Yes.
Great. Councillor Porra also mentioned cycle stands, disappointed that only 20% were Sheffield.
So for these high volume cycle parking non-residential buildings, Appendix L does allow for a high level of double tier spaces to make best use of space. They are providing the 20% Sheffield stands, and we have recommended a condition requiring details of the cycle parking so we can have sort of assurances around gas assist lift for the 2-tier.
And the other point I would say, it's a very different thing getting a bicycle into an upper tier if you haven't got enough space to step back and get it up there. So we need to know that there's sufficient spacing between the stands to enable people to get their bicycle onto the second tier. The application implies the applicant will be aiming for BREEAM outstanding, not just excellent, doesn't it? So I think covers that part. You were saying that, Councillor Porrow, that the footprint is not only a much taller building, but it's a bigger footprint, but you were reserving your thoughts on that. And the IDP, the Infrastructure Development Plan, and the relationship between that and other developers.
So, I mean, as it stands, the IDP doesn't have any weight, it hasn't been consulted on, and it doesn't identify any projects, so it wouldn't be still compliant to use the IDP in terms of the transport mitigation. So Cambridgeshire County Council have suggested transport mitigation based on existing projects, and that's still sort of under review.
Okay, so just a moment, back to my list. Councillor Veen.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check my understanding. Did I hear that construction of this building will not take place until movement of the water treatment plant has been, permission has been given and it is going to go ahead? Did I hear that correctly?
I don't think so. Mairead, would you like to?
No, that isn't the case. So the development would go ahead regardless of the situation with the Cambridge Water Recycling Centre. It has been designed in a way that it has a sealed facade with filtration to protect against odour for users of the building, and that building management plan is around, controls the external spaces around the building because those can't be used while the Water Recycling Centre is in situ. But then it does allow for details to be provided should the Water Recycling Centre relocate, but the application is considered acceptable as it is in the current situation with the Water Recycling Centre operational.
Yeah, thank you. And Councillor Smart?
So three things, the middle one's the important one. So firstly, I find it a bit perplexing that the JDCC terms of reference, in those terms of reference, this site is not in there. This is not in the established area. It's in the proposed area, but they were never updated, so I think they need to be updated online. So the substantive point is, I appreciate the work done by officers to improve what's on the table. And the developer has said, designed by Henning Larsson, but he passed away a decade ago, so it's a practice clearly you're referring to, and that's something of a different reference. So hesitant to critique the work of an architectural practice that still bears his name, but it's a grim-looking building. So that's a straightforward word to use, but in architectural terms, I'd say not a thing of beauty, not designed well, and does not sit well into its context. So I want to say I appreciate it's difficult. I want to say that it's difficult to design a beautiful building, but is it really? I appreciate that not every building can be a Sterling Prize winner, but this development is just not good enough in my opinion. So that's it really. Just on the other thing that's come up about the height of buildings. I mean, I remember looking at the development early on in northeast Cambridge and considering the sort of urban aspects of that and what we wanted from the city and from outside of the city to see. And to see an urban development would probably be appropriate for a city like Cambridge. So to see tall buildings from outside of Cambridge seems appropriate. So I think tall buildings is certainly not a bad thing, and I agree with Councillor Thornborough on that. So finally, the smaller point is, I'm not sure about putting cycles in the basement. I mean, there's a huge carbon cost to that decision. Why not celebrate cycles and put them in a lovely cycle shed? Thank you.
The cycles aren't in the basement, they're on the ground floor. It's the showers that are in the basement.
I stand corrected if so. I thought there were cycles in the basement as well.
They were originally.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take that back then.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there was anything else as clarification. Yes, thank you, but Others were first. Thank you. Councillor Smith, I'll add you to the list.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to note that there's been a collaboration between the developer and the planning service, and this has resulted in improvements to the proposal. I'm just referring to the key issues of height, scale and massing. We've seen a reduction in the height of the building, that there was a concern about the odour impact, and that too has been dealt with, and then sort of the impact on trees. I'll come back to that in a moment, but I think in planning issues, we need to consider the social impact and the environmental impact too, and it's the social impact I'm going to address first. There is a risk of displacement parking arising from this development, and there's reference made to that being within 1 kilometre of the site. Although elsewhere there's reference in the report to Cambridge North Station, which is within 1.3 kilometres. So I'm not sure whether the 1 kilometre area is really sufficient to consider the displacement parking, the fly commuting parking. So it requires very few commuters to park in residential streets to impact on the sense of place and the residential amenity of those people living there. And this is effectively amounts to an external, negative, it's a negative externality on the residents who have got no interest in this building, and but they are interested in protecting their residential amenity. Now, if we just look at the numbers, and I know we can argue about these, but just generally, potential 700 people in the building, maybe not all of them will be there at the same time, but still that's 250 square feet per person in the building, which is quite low density. 99 parking spaces, 308 cycle spaces for including visitors. And we're left with around 320 odd people travelling by other modes. And when we look at what the mitigation for this negative externality is, it's a £10,000 contribution to fund additional parking restrictions in the surrounding areas. That's at section 22.6, page 74. But have the residents been consulted? Do they know this is coming their way? And how would on-street parking for their visitors be managed in the future, and at what cost to them? And now in the city we have residential parking schemes where residents have to pay £50 odd a year to park their cars on the street. So I'd like to have further consideration of this impact on the residents and how that is going to be managed and mitigated for them, because I just don't think it's socially right to build a huge building like this and have a negative impact on the residents in the surrounding areas. So that is that particular point. So I just wanted to move then on to the environment impacts. And in your presentation, I was very pleased that you said that you respected the mature woodland north of the development, and that you are a long-term investor, Breakthrough Properties are a long-term investor in this site.
Just to remind you, we are addressing our questions to the case officer.
Right, yeah, okay, sorry, thank you. So on this particular point, I think the building is made more successful by the trees on the north boundary of the site. There's been discussion about the protection of the existing trees, the protection and replacement of ones that are going to be, the protection of the replacement trees. But actually, we know that planning affords very little protection for trees beyond the life of these conditions, and it would be, and an application could be submitted for tree works, and the whole lot could be brought down. So I would like to see a protection for this tree belt and the management of this tree belt in perpetuity.
Or for the operation of this building?
Operation of this building, absolutely. Thank you on that one. The other question then is on the environmental impact, which is what does it take to achieve the aspiration from going from BREEAM Excellent to outstanding, and can that be delivered? And the third one is, and this sits within the Section 106 agreement, which is going to be negotiated post this decision, but is actually a very fundamental part of our consideration or determination of this application, and yet we're not really cited on what the outcome is going to be. And I think it's so important that we are aware of that, and it's massively important because the scale and the scope of the contribution will form part of a cumulative contribution that will ensure that the trip budget for this whole area can be managed, and therefore that every developer, every company, and every employee, and all the rest of it has a fair chance of actually getting in and out of this development. So I think it's a significant question that needs to be answered, and this committee needs to know about it. So that's that question. There are three minor elements. The first one relates to safety on page 42 and page 43. I think some of the consultees have said that the EV charging should be outside the structure as far as possible. And the fire service have just said they're satisfied, but we know about EV cars that just sort of combust, and that needs particular fire retardant, measures. And are we assured that they can we be assured about those? On condition 29, travel plan, there's a reference to car clubs and pool bikes in the text. It's 1824, page 66. And I'd like to see specific reference to those measures in condition 29, the travel plan. It's just very loosely worded, and it just is not specific enough about what we're actually going to see out of that, emerge out of that condition. And then you'll be pleased to hear the last point. Condition 20, relating to the green roof. And it's on the amendment sheet. And I can't understand why the word not is in it. We might as well strike the whole thing out. I'm assuming that's... Just please reassure me that word's an error. Thank you.
Just on that last one, it's simply that the building shall not be occupied until the nest boxes have been provided.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I'm happy with that one.
Okay.
The addition of the word not.
Okay.
Right, okay. So, Mairead, do you want to make a start on some of those? So
yes. Can I start with just that not one? Actually, Councillor Poor drew my attention to this before the meeting. There is an error where an additional not has been added to condition 20. It says shall not be submitted to. Yeah. So that is an error. And my apologies for that.
Yeah, thank you. Wait right there.
Okay, so let's go
we
back.
We do read it, Chair. That's
Okay, so where are we? 29.
Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, not condition, that's travel plan. No, hang on. Is that travel plan or is it... Sorry, did you want me to read the one about bat boxes? Were you serious? Did you want me to read the one about bat boxes? Oh, okay. Which was the one you wanted me to read? 29, was it? Okay. So, Mairead, has this been amended? Because at present, it appears to be as it appears on page 105. Were you proposing an adjustment to this? It was I see, sorry, you were saying there was a reference on page 66 that you wanted to be included in condition 29. Okay. Let's find it. Did you want to suggest this? Or was it to do with provision of parking for e-scooters and things, or was
it could be if you wished, but my specific one was at 1824, which was the
car clubs and
car
pool
clubs and pool bikes and the lockers. And
okay, so can we, so that 18.24 says the travel plan will encourage the use of car clubs and pool bikes, brackets, Brompton lockers. We might need to take out the product placement there. Will be provided for staff. And indeed, why not for visitors as well? But anyway, so can we add that wording into condition 29? So I think it will read as it is at the moment, but it will say the travel plan shall specify, the methods to be used to discourage the use of the private motor vehicle and the arrangements to encourage use of alternative sustainable travel arrangements such as public transport, car sharing, and perhaps insert in there car clubs and pool bikes, or car clubs, cycling and pool bikes, etc. And walking. Are you happy that that wording comes back to us as Chair and Vice Chair to approve? Okay. Okay. Was there any other condition that you wanted to propose an amendment to, Councillor Smith? Green roof, condition 20, was it that you just... You got that one? Okay, good. Safety, page 40. Oh yes, the EV charging, we would prefer that maybe to be outside the building. What occurs to me about this is that actually even EV charging of bikes probably ought to be outside a building in view of what has happened recently in Cambridge. So that was condition... Is it to do with parking or is it to do with EV charging? In your opinion, Councillor Smith, since you suggested it. Is it going to come under car parking management? Or is it going to come under... No, it's not management, is it? It's construction. So it's got to come under...
I think, Chair, if there are... This is very light on...
EV charging, sorry, it's condition 10.
Is it? It's very light on, if like, the relationship between the EV charging and the putting out fires.
Okay, may I suggest that under condition 10, EV charging on page 97, where it says, prior to the installation of any electrical services, an electrical vehicle charge point scheme shall be submitted to and approved in writing. The scheme shall provide, and I think we need to consider whether it is possible, because as far as I'm aware, all of the parking on site is underneath the building at present. So, yes, Mairead, would you like to come back on that?
So, I mean, the council has an SPD that requires a large amount of EV charging to be provided to comply with the requirement of that. And it wouldn't be possible to provide those levels of EV charging outside of the building. But I do take your point around the impact. But I wondered if the measures that you're talking about would be covered by building regulations. They don't seem to fit comfortably within the planning appraisal.
Councillor Thornborough, I can see your hand is up. I'm just wondering whether placement of the EV charging locations might be a way around this, but Councillor Thornborough?
My understanding is that the requirements by insurance companies are way over anything that we or building control can ask for as far as protection.
So you mean insurance of buildings or insurance of cars?
Insurance of buildings will require an exceptionally high standard fire protection and fire escape and all of that for underground car parking.
So we
it
don't
will be,
need to cover that because it will be covered by building regs.
No, by building insurance. It's
Building
much higher than
insurance.
building regulation requirements.
So can we just then alert, do we need to put any wording into this condition just to alert people that they need to make sure that the fire resistance around any EV parking needs to comply with any likely insurance requirements or something of that ilk? No? No. Would you like to speak, Keith?
No.
No? I'm being told that it's unlikely that we can put that as a condition. However, people at the back, you hear what we're saying. Right. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. Our esteemed applicants from Vitam. Councillor Smith, have we covered... Well, I want to pick up on parking, which I will do, but was there anything you wanted to pick up? The S106 to be negotiated?
Yes, it was going from what does it take to achieve the aspiration of BREEAM outstanding. It was the in perpetuity protection of the trees as well long-term investors for the operational life of the building. And it was that question about 106. I don't think really can be answered now.
No.
But I think it's something that might be...
Don't worry, I'm going to pick up on that.
I think it needs to be brought back.
Okay, right. So can I just check, would the S106 as it's drawn up come back to the officers, obviously for consideration as it's drawn up? Sorry.
So the sort of final sums are being agreed, but I think we're generally actually at a point where we're in agreement. So it will be that 106 would be drafted shortly should these be approved.
And is it based on the heads of terms that we've got in the paper?
Yes, that's correct.
Obviously
Those
that's
3
logical, isn't
points.
it? Right. I'm taking Councillor Khan, and then I'm going to come in after.
There's 2 points I want to go and talk about. One is water and one is parking. First, in terms of water, we have a problem here at the moment. There's a critical problem in terms of supply and effect on the aquifer, which has resulted in, for instance, Darwin Green phase 2 and 3 being refused on the objection of the Environment Agency. And that's to do with the effect on the aquifer, which we are told is going to be resolved by the water management plan when new supply is provided to about 2032, and then a new reservoir in the late 2030s. And in this, from the look of that, from that point of view, you're looking at the water consumption over the period from now until the new supply comes into place, the total water consumption and the effect on the aquifer. And you also want, from the longer term, which is less critical, is that you should, we want to reduce the amount of water used from the point of view of general water resources and the carbon impact of all the process. Therefore, I'm interested, at the moment you've got a supply which is being used, there will be a period when it's being constructed when I would presume, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would presume the water consumption will be less, and then you'll have the new supply. The applicant has done a lot in terms of what it can do for the common services that they can reduce the supply. But in the long term, the actual consumption will depend upon the tenants that they find and what their demands are. And we can't know that. They can't know that until they've actually got the tenants in place. So there may be it may not be achievable in the demand, final demand may not be achievable over all of the building until we know who the tenants are. So I really want to know whether you've looked at the actual consumption, the change in consumption between if the existing building continued at full use until the time, and what the new building will do over that period until the new supplies come on source, because that's the critical immediate issue. And I'm very glad that the other information, have we got that information available? The second thing is about parking. When the previous application, I can't remember the name of the building that we did last month, the comment was made about the fact that lots of people are likely to Merlin Place are likely to park in the park and ride at Vitam. And I was concerned about that might be overflow, but we're told that's the least used park and ride, so there appears to be capacity there. And we've got another building which is going to greatly increase the employment. So it seems to me likely that quite a lot of people will use that. It seems to be unfortunate that we have various applications coming in which are increasing the amount of employment on this site. And there is scope, for instance, for a specific service to supply between the park and ride and this site. I think that is something that ought to be, the travel plan ought to be looking at on a comprehensive basis for this site in terms of provision, because that will be important in terms of accessibility. And I wonder whether that has been considered and will be considered in the travel plan, and whether that ought to perhaps be put as part of one of the objectives you're looking at in the travel plan.
That does, of course, mention public transport, does it not? Yeah. Were those your two questions? Okay, so firstly, before we go ahead, water supply, I just wanted to remind you that it has had a scoping document for EIA, environmental impact assessment, which has deemed that it does not require an environmental impact assessment. But I'll hand over to Philippa Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you. Certainly the water resource issue is incredibly topical and important at the moment in Greater Cambridge. Officers are satisfied that the water issue for this planning application has been well considered and addressed. We've got enhanced mitigation for water efficiency, which goes over and above our aspirations, which is we're very pleased to have secured. The other application that you have referenced, you'll recollect it's gone to a non-determination appeal on water resource grounds. There was an objection from the Environment Agency in respect of that development. That was EIA development. We're comfortable that the environmental impact of this scheme is not going to be significant. It's got appropriate water efficiency mitigation, so it's a very different situation. We have got that package of water efficiency conditions which goes as far as we can go at the moment, but we're very pleased. We have looked at the use of the water and the future consumptions, but again, we are comfortable that at those levels, there's not going to be a demonstrable additional risk of significant harm to the water aquifers for this particular planning application.
Thank you, Philippa. Can I come back to Mairead then on the matter to do with parking and whether that can be included in the travel plan, or does it need reinforcement, reference to the possible use of the park and ride?
So I think the suggestion is around a private bus service that would move employees from, say, the park and ride to the site. I don't think that's a measure that's suggested in the framework travel plan. I think we could suggest it as perhaps an informative, that might be something to look at, but I don't think in terms of the sort of mode share that's identified in the transport assessment that's identifying a need for that at the moment to require it specifically.
I see a problem that in any case you would want to probably do it collaboratively between the different, and that's difficult to apply to one application. Which is why I think
Councillor Khan, that will have to wait for the AAP, will
yeah,
it not?
What I was going to say is that
yeah.
but it might be, well, I think informative is possibly the best process.
I would agree, and I'd support an informative of that type if Mairead could contrive such an informative, or Philippa.
And just a little request, because I use earphones, can I make sure that the people on the head table turn their loudspeakers off when they're not being used, because the sound of the typing on the computer comes through loud and clear.
I'm so sorry, Councillor Khan. We'll try to remember that. Okay, don't worry, members. I just want to come back in myself on parking, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to have any more questions. Councillor Smith has already referred to the social impact of the parking. And I just wanted to clarify why this concerns me, because the building is going to become 4 times bigger in terms of floor space than it is currently, and yet it will have fewer parking spaces than the building currently has. And it is a mere 0.3 miles, sorry, Councillor Smith, I'm working in Imperial, to roads in Milton, which are already used by people at Cambridge Science Park and elsewhere to park in and then walk. back south of the A14. That's literally just a 7-minute walk across the Jane Coston Bridge, whereas it is a mile to Cambridge North Station, which is a 20-minute walk from this location. So what I wanted to clarify was whether the provision in the S106, which is at paragraph 22.7, whether we can ensure in your, let's see, 22.7 on page 74, this was, the implication is that this is for, it says, in the surrounding area, but the place it's most likely to affect is Milton. And I would like to ask members if you would like that to be reinforced to protect the residents in Milton, because obviously as a Greater Cambridge Planning Service, we're aware that going on in the background is a request for civil parking enforcement in our area. The city also already benefits from that, but this is coming to South Cambs. But the implication of that is that then double yellow lines and parking restrictions would be put in Milton, but then the residents of Milton who currently don't need a parking permit would be required to buy one in just the way that Councillor Smith has referred to. So what I would like to ask is whether it is possible, and this might be either to Mairead or legal officer, whether that provision in the heads of terms at paragraph 22.6 could be made specific to protect residents in Milton. Just one moment, let me have an answer to that question. Okay, Councillor Stobart.
The prime place, if you're thinking about Milton, is Tesco's. Tesco car park is just...
Tesco's car park has a CCTV camera on it.
Yeah,
the Rowans in Milton does not.
Okay.
And is already used extensively. So I would just like to, I take your point, but yes, Tesco's car park, but they have a 2-hour limit on parking, which is monitored in the car park.
But wouldn't Tesco management feel that was a significant burden, you know, if we hadn't taken steps to manage the car parking situation?
Quite possibly. So, okay, we've got, Tam, thank you, I'm glad to see you're there. Do you want to come in, Tam, and give some thoughts on that? This is Tam Parry, who's the county... Do you want to introduce your role, Tam?
Hi, thank you. Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Tam Parry. I work in Cambridge County Council in the Transport Assessment Team. So I'll just mention about the parking, as is what you're talking about at the moment. So the Section 106 request from myself was for £10,000, and the purpose of this money was to be able to implement yellow lines on the roads within 1 kilometre of the site. So yes, that does include Milton, definitely, because Milton is, as you say, the likely place where anyone might seek to park. Now, what we can do is put in yellow lines in locations where people are parking if they turn out to be parking in places that are not good places to park, so like on junctions or outside people's driveways and blocking people in, that type of kind of inconsiderate parking. Can't stop people from just parking on the road. That's a normal thing that people do. You know, you can park your car on the road wherever you like. What we need to do is control where parking occurs, and that's the purpose of this money. Now, controlled parking zones or resident parking zones are a different thing. Don't get confused between the two. What you've got in Cambridge city centre, near the shops and near the railway station, are controlled parking zones. That's where people pay a permit to have a resident parking permit, and they typically pay £50 or £60 a year for that permit, and spaces are marked on the streets where they can park. That's not what we're talking about in Milton. It's a very different situation in Milton to Cambridge city centre. You're not going to have in Milton a resident parking scheme like what you've got in Cambridge. What you're going to have in Milton...
Excuse me, Tam, but isn't that the whole purpose of the civil parking enforcement, which is
no,
going to be brought in?
No, it's not. the purpose of the civil parking enforcement is so that traffic wardens can go around and park and ticket cars that are parked inappropriately on yellow lines. And you can't do that at the moment in South Cambs. You can do it in the city, but you can't do it in South Cambs. That's what civil enforcement does, is control parking where you've got yellow lines.
Yes, but
So
that's what we're
yellow
going to
lines.
bring in. That's what will
That's
be
right.
brought
You
in
can't.
South
Yeah, you
Cambs.
can't do it at the moment, but you will be able to do it in the future. Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, could this money be ring-fenced for Milton? Because
The money
1
already
kilometre,
includes Milton.
The reason
the
I'm
1
asking
yeah.
is that 1 kilometre of the site brings in also a lot of the Cowley Road site, which is reasonable. But I just wondered whether there is specific protection for Milton.
Absolutely, no problem at all about putting Milton into the text in the 106, and even asking if it's possible for the amount to be increased if you're worried that it's not enough. I think it's enough personally. I think if we need to put in some yellow lines in Cowley Road or in Milton, that sum should be sufficient. But I'm not averse to asking for 15,000, and if you're concerned about that, but really, yeah, including
I'll take
Milton's
that, Tam.
not a
15,000
difficulty.
would be great. And if we could put in the wording around Milton, I'd be even happier. Thank you. Right,
No
I will
problem.
leave my...
May I mention minibuses?
Minibuses, yes, please do, Tam.
Sorry, thank you. Taking the liberty here, but you were talking earlier about the minibuses. There is actually currently a minibus for St John's Innovation Park, and that goes from the Innovation Park down to Cambridge North Station. And this Vitam site will be able to benefit from that minibus, so the employees can use that minibus as well as the existing employees in the Innovation Park. So that's a really, really good thing. I'm sure if that minibus strategy is, successful, St John's will look to improve it in the future, and they may even put bus on that goes to the park and ride in the future or other destinations. Who knows? But I think it's really good that there's one already at the moment, and that's why there is no mention of one in the mitigation strategy.
Tam, do we need to actually add that in as would it be helpful to add that into the wording about the transport plan?
I think it will be picked up. It'll be picked up automatically in the travel plan monitoring that takes place. I think Mairead was thinking about it being an informative. I think that's a good thing.
So yes, if that could be added as an informative, that would be great. Thank you. Right. I think the next person that was my wishing to speak about parking. But Councillor Stobart, you were next, and then we've got Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chair. So a few things about cycling and then a few comments. What is welcome is the fact that the cycle store is undercover. On the face of it, quite secure. So that deals with two big issues. But I'm just thinking about, if you will, the use case for the arrivals in the morning, particularly a wet morning, and the departures of an evening, particularly when it's dark. And just the thought of having to manoeuvre your bike in what's quite a restricted space when there are a lot of people around, it just strikes me as not fitting with this sort of being concentrated in the corner of the building. You know, what's good practice for a cycle store is a uniflow arrangement, so in at one end and out at the other, and space. And to some extent, you know, we were spoilt by the benchmark, I think, of the Grand Arcade parking, which is lovely. You know, that's what we should aspire to. But I would accept that, you know, there often isn't the space for that. So I welcome the fact that it's undercover and secure, but worry a little bit about how it will work out in practice. But I think that is for the tenant to figure out in response to feedback. Now, what is more of a concern is that little spot at the end of Jane Coston Bridge, which is at the end of a slope, and where traffic will be, cycle traffic that is, but there will also be pedestrian traffic crisscrossing. I worry about the speeds with which some of the cyclists come down that bridge. You know, it's very attractive to whiz along and onto Cowley Road, but the situation is going to get a lot more complex. I'm glad Tam's on the line, because I'm wondering if the priority structure around that end of Cowley Road and just the curve into the front of the new building, whether the priorities can be managed better. You know, spills on bikes don't kill people, but they're really inconvenient and off-putting. And so just making that work smoothly would be great, particularly given the number of cyclists we're trying to encourage through this scheme. So third kind of substantive comment here, I'd just like a reassurance that the cooling capacity that's installed for this building, even if it's going to be sealed, and we're going to have overheating events cropping up with increasing frequency, that there is sufficient cooling capacity, whether it's by initial installation or by building in the headroom for new plant and equipment in due course, that can be managed. And then just two brief things, perhaps to be noted. I'm intrigued, paragraph 1015, sorry, I'm going to give you a page reference as well, page 47. Just this mention of, to keep the vibration levels in the building low, we need to use a concrete frame. I'm not a structural engineer, so I can't comment in detail, but I'm surprised that we have to resort to concrete to achieve vibration levels. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And I don't think there's anything we could do here except learn as a committee, whether for R&D buildings which require low vibration levels quite accepted, that we do always have to resort to concrete as the constructional method. I know that the comment in the papers suggests that's going to be minimised as far as possible. Concrete has good natural damping properties, but yeah, let's be better informed about this. And then finally, we are living in the era, and we've just been talking about water a lot, of stewardship. And the fact that we can't enforce a monitoring regime doesn't stop us talking about it and suggesting to the developer that in the long term, we would like to see water consumption hold to those values. Even at first occupation, there may be people, companies occupying the building that are a bit profligate in their use of water. We'd like to be sure that that could be picked up and then dealt with. So they're just a couple of comments at the end, but I think the cycling provision, I suppose it's really a note to the developer to say this could be an issue, but I'm very concerned about the busyness of the foot of Jane Coston Bridge and what we can do about it.
Thank you very much. And so, Mairead, can you pick up the concept of perhaps some idea of one-way access to and from cycle parking, and whether that's something that could be discussed with the developer?
Yes, so I believe the way the store functions has been modelled in terms of peak arrivals and departures, and arrivals would be true here. And my understanding is that there is a way out this way, so there is a sort of one-way system, and the store is designed to be able to cope with the kind of peak times at both sides.
Okay, and the other one, I will point out that at the southern landing point of the Jane Coston Bridge, there is actually a bollard in the middle of it to stop people herring down there too fast. And because there is a wiggle at the end, people need to be careful as they come off, because it's not always obvious. So there are design elements of the southern foot landing point of the bridge which actually make navigation around this area quite difficult. So do you think there might be whether it might be possible, Tam, or even Mairead, to actually look at that whole landing area, the road, the access, the vehicular access, and whether that can be made safer, ideally with priority for pedestrians, then cycles, then vehicles?
Hi, I'm happy to answer that one.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay. Yeah, so the Jane Coston Bridge and the cycle path down Cowley Road is subject to change because it's part of the Water Beach Greenway, and the Greater Cambridge Partnership who are bringing forward the Greenway, they have done some drawings and done some, I think there's a public consultation live at the moment actually on the latest drawings for this area, and I think one of the considerations that they'll have in their mind is what to do at the bottom of the bridge. So it's kind of outside of the scope of this application in terms of redesigning that area, because it's the area that they're looking at as part of the Greenway. The contribution being made by the applicants to strategic transport is specifically to the Water Beach Greenway, because that, as you say, passes the site and is one of the main ways that I think people get to this location from further afield. In terms of access to the cycle park, in the future, when the St John's Innovation Park proposals that Mairead was telling you about in her presentation come forward, then they will actually build a cycle path on Cowley Road adjacent to the building. That path will then tie in to whatever the Greenway does at the bottom of Jane Cawston Bridge. In the meantime, the applicant is just providing a drop curb onto Cowley Road, and cyclists will use the short section of Cowley Road between the bridge and the access to the cycle parking. But then when the St John's site comes forward in the future, then the cycle path will be built by them, and the cyclists will have a benefit of using that cycle path. So it's a joined up strategy, and it should be really, really good for this building in the future.
Thank you very much, Tam. Can I just pick up, Mairead? Thank you for putting this plan up, because one of the other things I wanted to ask about was the access to the car park is down ramps that go underneath the building. Yeah. And the up ramp is the one to the north of that, is it? Or is that two? Do they go down and up on that ramp where your cursor is?
Yes, it's a two-way ramp.
And I noticed that the access to the service area, the vehicles will have to go forward and then reverse into that area. And then they'll come out in forward gear, won't they? That's the way it's depicted on the swept path plan.
Yes, that's right. That's showing that vehicles can turn and exit the site in forward gear.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the case officer? Okay, so members are... Oh, sorry, Councillor Smart, yes?
It was about the thing we spoke about earlier, but I didn't get in. So Chair, you've shown a particular interest in Milton and potential funding going to that ward, but not declared an interest as a local ward councillor. So I'd note that the site is actually in King's Hedges and also close to in East Chesterton and close to King's Hedges, where I'm a councillor. And I'd hope that any funding that was going to support Milton would also be going to those wards too, as they are very close, as is Milton.
Sorry, Councillor Smart, thank you for reminding me. I did discuss the fact that I live in Milton with the legal officer, the legal advisor, and I've not taken part in any discussion. I should have, you're quite right, I should have declared an interest in the outset, but only in as much as to say that I have seen these plans in the same way as many of the public have. I've not involved myself in any discussion of them as a local member. And way back when the first application was proposed, I think I attended an exhibition, but again, I'm always very careful not only to ask questions and not to express a view. So in that sense, that's perfectly fine. I'd quite happy to declare that if that's deemed necessary, although in discussion it was felt that I didn't need to. But fair enough, yes, if we need to have any works that money should be we were told it would go within a 1 kilometre area, were we not?
Yeah, that's all fine, Chair. I was just referring to the earlier conversation about parking and, you know, what Tam said and giving funding to Milton. That was what I was getting on at.
Fine.
Chair, can I come in there? I think officers have picked up the clear messages about where the money ought to be spent, parish, ward and so forth. So I think the terms of reference that we've got or that are within the report are sufficient, and we will go away and work up closer text to achieve what you're all pointing towards. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Keith. That's helpful. Right, so members, I don't think we've got any more questions, so I think I'm minded to go to a recommendation if you're in agreement with the amendments. Do you want to summarise, Philippa, any amendments and adjustments we've made?
Thank you, Chair. I will certainly have a go. So we are taking 2 votes today. There's 2 separate recommendations because, as you'll recollect, this is a cross-boundary development proposal, so there are 2 separate planning applications. So if I can draw your attention first to page 78 of the paper agenda at section 25 of the committee report. So we're first taking planning application reference 2301487 FUL. So that's subject to, and I'm not going to read these limbs out, but the limbs relating to conditions and informatives, which you'll find on section 26, and the requirement to complete a section 106 agreement, with a number of changes which I'm going to summarise now. So the first suite of amendments were as presented by Mairead in her presentation and are also on the amendment sheet. And they are, number 1, modest changes to the description of the development. Number 2, updated wording to condition 20, which relates to green roofs. Number 3, updated wording to condition 36, which relates to burden back boxes. And number 4, updated condition 35 in relation to water conservation. I've also taken a note of a number of other updates as noted by yourselves as part of this committee discussion, and I'm going to go through those now. Condition 14 in relation to hard and soft landscaping, an update to ensure any replacement tree also benefits from 5-year protection. Condition 29 relating to the travel plan, updated to include reference to car clubs and pool bikes. An additional informative relating to the encouragement of the applicant to consider provision of minibus services to the site and beyond. And then with regard to the Section 106 agreement itself, an update to Table 4 in respect of parking restrictions in the surrounding area, left to officers to review the heads of terms, but to also secure an increase in the sum required to £15,000. I would suggest that as the proposed changes are modest, they don't need to go back to Chair and Vice Chair for sign-off.
I'd accept that. So members, I just want to check, do we need to take a vote for each?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So,
just to clarify, this is now in respect of application 2301487 FUL.
So hang on, there was a not that needed to come out, wasn't there? Where was that? Right. Was that in the amendment sheet? Right.
Yes, so that's actually in the amendment sheet. It's not in the text. The amendment sheet incorrectly on condition 20 of just one of the permissions. 2301-487, there is an additional not that needs to be removed.
Okay. And so that comes in the amendment sheet. Okay. So members, with all those additional amendments and informatives, so let's go to the recommendation for 2301-487/FUL. All those in favour with those amendments, would you like to show? Okay, that's unanimous.
No, it's not,
Is it not? Oh, sorry.
So that's
one. Sorry, anybody against the application? Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 1 abstention.
Let's vote against.
One against. Sorry.
That's carried.
So that's carried. Thank you. And then the same recommendation, but applying to 23-01509/FUL. All those in favour, would you raise your hands?
That's 9 again.
That's 9. And any objections? Any, what's the word?
Against.
Thank you. Against? Thank you. So that's carried. Thank you very much, members. Before you go, I'd just like to remind you that we received a list of committee dates for the year 2024-25. Councillor Porrow, got a concern?
I just note that Easter's moved that year, so April the 16th is actually the Wednesday just before Easter, so it's A, in a school holiday, and B, when probably most of us will be planning to be on holiday. I think there's an extra Wednesday in the month, so I think that might need to move to the 23rd, because if you, I just looked it up on the school's calendar and Googled when Easter is, because I think we normally try and avoid school holidays. 5, as far as I can see, Easter, that is the Easter bank holiday weekend, so I suggest...
Right, you'd like the date of April the 16th, 2025 to be moved to the 23rd, if that's at all possible.
I'm just suggesting because we normally avoid school holidays, and I think Easter's jumped 2 weeks later.
That's fine.
So, thank you.
Councillor Smart?
So aside from sort of root and branch look at the dates, I'd say the most easy fix that would make things better for people would be to have 10 meetings in a year, not 12. It might make things worse for planning, but I mean, the meeting in August is always difficult because people tend to go on holiday in August, and the meeting at Christmas during the seasonal break, that time of year, is not easy either. So that would be my suggestion, but planning officers will have to consider that.
I think it's important to have the date in, but I know that officers would actually try quite hard not to assign applications to it if they don't have to be, and that then that meeting could be cancelled. But I think it's better to have it in our diaries as a potential date to be reviewed closer to the time. Does that make sense? So
Chair,
members, yes.
Sorry. I've just been looking at the calendar and we actually schedule extra planning committees, so I'd need to maybe take away if I can do that.
Okay. Yes, so all of this subject to confirmation that it can be done. Don't worry, we're not saying you have to, we're just saying if we can. And of course, remember members, these fit in with planning committee at City, which I think is the first Wednesday of the month, and South Cambs, which is the second. So we fall on usually on the third Wednesday? Ish, sort of thing. Right, members, thank you very much. So I'll call it to a close at 13:07. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting, which is...
It's on a Tuesday.
December?
On a Tuesday.
December. Remember, next meeting is on a Tuesday in December. Let me just see.